Am I the asshole for refusing to move in with my boyfriend to care for my 16-year-old cat in his final months? Throwaway, and I'm on mobile, sorry for the format. I've been dating my 24F boyfriend, 26M, for a bit over a year now, and he really wants me to move in with him. The problem? My cat. My cat is 16, and dying. The vet says it would be unwise to hope for anything past 6 months. I've had this cat since I was a child, he was there for me through everything. There are a few reasons I don't want to move. 1. Moving is really stressful for cats, and I don't want to cause any unneeded stress for my old boy. 2. My boyfriend has a fairly energetic Rottweiler. My cat has never been good with dogs, almost killed when he was 2 years old. We had to amputate his leg and it was so badly crushed on injured. I understand my boyfriend wants me to be close to him, I want that too, but is it really so much to ask for a few months for my cat to pass away? It hurts me so much that he keeps calling me unfair and not committed in this relationship I am. But my longest friend is dying, and I want him to be comfortable. He doesn't seem to grasp how important my cat is to me. He has never liked cats, and even made the joke, when he's gone I will finally be your number one man. I don't know how to handle this at all. Any advice is welcome. Comments. Comment 1. If he has a dog, how can he not understand what it's like to love an animal? Oop. He doesn't think cats actually have emotions or something. He's one of those people who thinks cats are evil and dogs are a saving grace, which was fine before. I understand not liking cats is almost as common as liking them. Comment 2. Je comprends qu'il pourrait ne pas aimer le chat lui-même mais pas pourquoi il ne comprend pas comment vous vous sentez à propos du chat. Comment 3. I don't think it's unreasonable. After 16 years the cat is part of the family. Of course you want to make his passing as easy and safe as possible. If he doesn't get it, frankly he sounds like a tool. Update, 1 day later. First off, let me say I'm still shaking, so if this is a rambled mess I am sorry. All your kind words from yesterday made me cry, thank you all so much. I thought I would give some backstory to how my BF and I met. It was through a support group, as I mentioned. Growing up, until age 7, I had a very abusive dad. When I was 7 he tried to kill my mother and I. Luckily the cops intervened and they took him away. My mom charged him and he got put away. When the trial was done, we moved, and my mom gave me Moo, don't judge the name, I was 8, from a local shelter. I didn't fit in at the new school, and Moo was the best thing in my life. Back to the support group. I shared my story, and my BF confronted me after saying he also had abusive parents growing up, and we bonded over our similar situations. I didn't realize how much control he had over me until recently. He convinced me to stop seeing my therapist. We also stopped going to group. He used to tell me what to wear, how to style my hair. It's very curly, and recently I've been straightening it because he would always say it looked better. A few hours ago, I invited him over for lunch and to talk. Luckily, Moo was in my room sleeping. I told him what you guys said, saying that if it was his dog he would be upset. He blew up. He told me that wasn't the point. The point was I wasn't committed to him, or didn't care about us. He started throwing things, a glass, some books I had lying about, and some picture frames. It was terrifying. I had never seen him this angry before, and I just reverted back to what I used to do as a kid. Curl up, cover yourself as much as you can, stay quiet. Bless my roommate, who came home during this fit. She had brought the security guard because as she was walking in she heard the shouting, items breaking. My BF was escorted out. As he left I just screamed, "Don't come back. I hope it sticks." I've blocked his number, and my landlady has been notified not to let him in, as have the guards. Next step is neighbors. I don't really know what to do from here. I emailed my therapist, hopefully she will let me come back. My mom is on the way over right now, and my roommate is with me too. I'm so terrified. I didn't realize how much control he had over me. I thought all his early behavior was just because he had clingy issues from his own upbringing. I'm going to have a bath, relax, let my hair go curly again, and cuddle my baby. I'm really glad Moo was in my room. Thank you all for the help. I didn't think any of this was wrong until you guys brought it up. I still love him, and feel bad for him. He had a shit upbringing too, and I'm sure he's messed up from it, but I'm going to try to move on. After my cat dies, I'm going to move out from this place, to somewhere he doesn't know about. Thank you all again. Edit for everyone who wants to see Moo. Copy from another comment. I don't want to be identified in case anyone I know or in the future knows finds this. That's why I made a throwaway, as I do have a regular Reddit account. Imagine this. A pretty big tomcat, mainly white with 3 huge black spots on his back, leg, and side of his head. Minus the back right leg, and yellow eyes. An 8-year-old me thought he looked like a cow, and cows moo, hence the name Moo Moo. He's pretty derpy, but he's mine. Edit 2. Moved to tears again by all your comments. Thank you. I'm going to log off this account now, and hopefully never have a reason to use it again. Thank you all so much for the help, I love you all. Comments. Comment 1. As distressing as it must have been for you, I'm so glad he finally showed his true colors, but even more so that you were brave enough to end things for good. You're a strong woman, and getting back to therapy will make you stronger and more aware of the intentions of any future abusers who may want to prey on you because of what you've been through. BW. Curly hair is gorgeous. Seriously, wear your curls with pride. Comment 2. Sorry you had to find out he sucks that way up. Stick to your guns and don't let him back in. He is controlling and most likely could have become physical if not for your roommate coming. Don't let the sob stories from him get to you. Comment 3. Yep, he was trying to separate OP from Moo Moo because they always try to take away our support systems. He couldn't stand that there was anything you loved more than him. Good riddance and stay strong, OP. Comment 4. I'm pretty sure this comment will get lost among the others, but maybe you'll see it, and I think you need all the support right now, no matter how small. I'm sure it's hard to let him go and you still love him. It's not like you can fall out of love in a matter of seconds. But please, please, please stay strong and don't take him back under any circumstances. I'm sure you already know this, as you seem like an extremely bright and sensible lady, just maybe you need to read this in a weaker moment. Surround yourself with all the support you can, family, friends, therapy, take legal action if needed. I don't care how shit his upbringing was. It might be a reason to be abusive, but never an excuse. Don't let history repeat itself. Take care, cuddle your buddy. Oop. Thank you, my mom got here a while ago and she said the same thing. Don't end up like she did. It's scary how I almost went into the same cycle. I love him, but some of the things he screamed at me, I hate that cat, I'll kill him, amongst others, scared me. I could never expose my cat to that. I won't go back to someone who would hurt something so close to me. Update commenting in Aboru in the other sub, 6.5 years later. Hi everyone. This is kinda crazy. I was on my regular Reddit account, I am an avid follower of this subreddit, when I saw my own post on here. I thought I would give some updates. Moo Moo died around 4 months after this post. He was put down, since his quality of life was declining rapidly, and while he could have lived maybe another 3 or 4 months, I didn't want that for him. He was in the last stages of kidney disease, and needed so many drugs of subcutaneous hydration to just keep him going. I miss him every single day. I still have his ashes with me, and I make sure to keep him in a sunbeam on the window. That was his favorite thing. Regarding my ex, the embarrassing part of it is, I still felt so badly for him for so long. I saw a comment on the original post that said it sounded like I was just looking for validation that his behavior wasn't okay, and I think that's true. Besides controlling my hair, he also pretty much decided everything in our relationship. What we did together, what we ate, shows we watched. It seemed so small at the time, that he never wanted to go to the places I picked or listen to the music I liked. He always had a reason at first, but then eventually it was just because he didn't want to do those things. And for some reason I let that happen. I did try to go back to that therapist and the group, but even after I told her and them what happened, I felt unsafe being there. For the first few months, he would stake out my apartment, and I couldn't trust he wasn't also following me to therapy. Maybe stake out isn't the right word, but he would leave letters and packages and stuff outside my building, so I knew he was there. Could be there at any time. Cops were not helpful since he never made himself known to me, although my roommate swears she saw him a couple times across the street. Basically just said to be careful. My therapist and I moved to phone calls, for a while. I don't know if this will surprise anyone, but turns out XBF was into the no sugar. A lot of our fights I now think he was high for at least some of them, especially the last blow up. He ended up getting in a fight with some dudes at a bar and he was fucked up when booked. This was probably about a month or so after Moo Moo died. I broke my lease, which my roommate, who I am still friends with, was really nice about. I moved back in with my mom, lives in a different town, for a few months, before finding another job just one town over from her. This was her suggestion. She wanted to keep an eye on me and make sure I didn't let him back into my life. She was and is my rock to this day. He got out after only a few months for good behavior, and while he didn't know where I lived, I am extremely thankful for my mom. There are times when I would hear that his experience changed him, via PPL I knew, and I would think, maybe he has changed. I was so lonely without Moo Moo. My mom nipped those in the bud every time. She would ask me things like, even if you go back, what then? You get married and have kids? Do you think he would be a good father? It was sobering to think of what I experienced as a child being continued. Eventually I steeled myself with the help of a new therapist, suggested from my old one, and worked on my self-confidence a lot. About what I deserve. When COVID hit, I had a lot of time to kind of break down parts of my life I didn't before. I have tried being in relationships since, but there was this underlying feeling of stress in each one. About 2 years ago I figured out I think I am asexual. Sex was always so uncomfortable for me, even when it was physically enjoyable I never really wanted the act. I just assumed this was trauma and fear of intimacy. That is what most people and therapists had told me. I am currently in a relationship with a lovely person, NB, and we are both asexual. We do kiss, but we rarely ever move beyond that. With them, there is no expectation for more. They are also from a less than happy childhood. They were in the foster system, but that isn't my story to share, so I won't. Just know that I am happy. We have been together for a year, and they are so considerate and kind. They bring me flowers at least once a month, they make sure I can express myself, they encourage my interests and actually want to hear about them. Most of all, they love my curly hair, and they love cats. I never adopted another cat after Moo Moo. I think I was terrified for a long time that if I did, they could be used against me. My partner has 2 cats, who I love. We are currently trying to work out moving in together. My place has a better location, but theirs is larger. We've decided to try and find a completely new place together that we can both agree on, but the process for rentals right now is horrid. There have been 2 places so far that we applied to and didn't get. Anyway, my life is going great. I still have lots of trauma that I live with, but I know I can get back up when I fall. I have people I love, who also love me. I probably won't respond to any comments, and I'll most likely delete this account in a few days. I don't need it anymore. But before I did, I thought leaving one last update was called for. Thank you for all your kind words, and helping me find confidence to get out of that relationship. Much love to everyone. Now to the next story, story 2. A new neighbor began watching me, carrying a rifle, and leaving dead fish in my mailbox. Despite reporting him, the harassment escalated. Original post February 4, 2019. A few weeks ago, a new neighbor moved in across the street. To my knowledge, it's one guy who is about 40 to 50 years old. For the past few weeks since he moved in, he has been taking walks around the neighborhood, and every once in a while when he passes my house, my living room has a window that can see into the front yard, he stands and watches me. When I go outside to investigate, he just says something to the tune of admiring my shingle work, or stargazing. He has used these excuses before. He never comes directly onto my property when he does this. A few days ago I came home, and when I went to pull the trash cans back from the street, my neighbor was sitting on his front porch with a rifle in his lap in plain view. I ask him if there is anything wrong, and he just nods at me. I went back into my house and called the police. Now the spot I called the police from was in my kitchen. The only way to look into my kitchen from a window is if you walked up to my living room window and peered to the left. After hanging up the phone, I turned towards the living room and saw my neighbor about 2 feet away from my window, peering in with a rifle. I run into my room and locked the door. After the police arrived, I told them what happened, and they told me that since he wasn't pointing a gun at me, that it wasn't a threat. The most they can do is trespass him, but by the time they arrived, he left his house. Yesterday I came home at around 10 p.m. and found a dead fish in my mailbox. Without any evidence, how can I stop my neighbor from harassing me? Can I get a restraining order against him? Relevant comments. Comment 1. Make a police report about the dead fish. Make the police take the report, even if you don't actually know for sure who put it there, you have your suspicions. Tell them. If they refuse to take a report, calmly escalate the matter to an officer with a higher standing and don't leave until a report is taken. Keep all of the police reports you make. And, as everyone else has suggested, definitely get a good home security system, preferably with several cameras. Comment 2. I don't know shit about the law, but I'd say you should get a camera installed and probably keen any evidence of things put through your door. Then speak to the police lawyer to see what your options are. Up to a deleted comment. I'm fully prepared for any future aggression, but I am looking for a non-violent route first. I don't think I had cause in any of my previous encounters to use force. Since then I got cameras with night vision, motion detection alerts, window tint for my living room, and big thick curtains. I also got a few of those stickers for the area of my house that says "Insured by Glock" to deter any intruders. Now the first night I got my cameras, I checked them the morning after to see how they worked. I made sure that there are no blind spots and all of them are fixed with no movement at all. When I checked the cameras the morning before, someone walked up to them wearing all black including a mask and pointed them down. When I left for work that morning, someone spray painted a knife on my mailbox. I filed a report with the postal inspector and called the police. The police said without any video evidence, there wasn't much I could do. That night, I woke up to a loud noise hitting my house every so often. I checked the cameras and couldn't see anything, so I went out and investigated and noticed small holes in my house. Looking around the ground, I see discharge rounds. I called the police again and confirmed that it was 22 shots from far away. I have a concrete home, so that would explain the lack of penetration. The police offer to have a car patrol the neighborhood and sit outside for 3 days and nothing happens. I asked them if I could get a protective order from my neighbor who has a history of being hostile, and they said since I had no direct evidence implicating him, that I can't file it out of nowhere despite previous confrontations. I filed another report with a different officer and got the same spiel. I asked them to take fingerprints of the bullets then, and they chuckled and put the bullets in a bag and left. 3 days ago, I heard shots again and checked the cameras and noticed they were facing my neighbor's house just where I put them, and I saw a silhouette shooting from the middle of my street before stopping and running to the back of my neighbor's house. After that, I called the police in my room while watching the cameras. The police come and walk me through the same BS as last time even after I showed them the cameras. They knocked on my neighbor's door and he claimed he heard and saw nothing. After they left, I asked him if he was telling the truth and he looked at and smiled. It was very unnerving. I don't know what to do at this point. Top comment. OP. A suggestion for you might be to purchase a trail camera, essentially an outdoor camera that runs on batteries and records to a memory card, and try to place it somewhere non-obvious on the outskirts or edge of your property. A few other thoughts: go to your local county courthouse and actually inquire there to what the requirements are for a restraining and/or no contact order. The police may not be the best persons to ask about if your neighbor qualifies for one. Contact your local chief of police and let them know your property has been vandalized and shot at. Ask if there's anything else that can be done. Final update. April 23, 2019. 3 months later. This similar behavior is something I suffered over the course of 1 to 2 months in Florida. I made posts in LA asking for help and got reasonably good answers. Unfortunately, my neighbor pushed it too far and tried to break into my house in the middle of the night after a series of weird escalating behavior. As a result, I shot him multiple times. I was questioned and interviewed over 7 hours and then released due to Florida's stand your ground laws. Turns out the neighbor was mentally ill and the family is currently trying to sue me for wrongful death. Hope this goes better for Leo P than me. I should have just moved. Now to the next story, story 3. Am I the asshole for telling my brother he'd never measure up to our late father after he lectured me about drinking and quitting soccer? Original post March 11, 2019. I have 3 older siblings, 2 sisters who are 28, and my older brother Chris, who is 26. I am the youngest child at 16. 3 years ago our dad died of cancer, after a pretty rough battle. Being 11 when my dad got sick, I remember it being a pretty scary time, not always understanding what was happening, but the one thing I always knew was that Chris was there for me. Obviously it was also a very difficult time for Chris, but he really looked out for me during that time. And Chris has continued to be the same, great guy and awesome big brother to this day. So, 3 weekends ago I went to a party, drank too much, and I got drunk for the 3rd time in my life. I called Chris and asked him if he could come get me when I wanted to leave, and my friends, one of which was our designated driver who was sober, wanted to stay. Chris came to pick me up, worried that I was going to get in a car with a drunk driver if he didn't. The next day he lectured me on my drinking problem, and getting into cars with drunk drivers. Things got heated, because I felt like he was assuming a lot. Because I'm a junior in high school and I've only drank 3 times at parties, which I feel is pretty normal, and I wasn't going to get in a car with a drunk driver. My DD was completely sober, so I feel like I was more responsible than he was giving me credit for. But yes, I was drunk enough to think calling him at 10 p.m. out of the blue to pick me up because I was tired was a good idea. And then 2 weeks ago Chris found out I quit the soccer team. He started lecturing me on commitments, and talking about how I need to be doing an extracurricular for college, and I shouldn't just quit because of laziness. And then things got heated, and he started talking about my drinking problem again, and then talking about my room being messy, and then we were really arguing and he was accusing me of being disrespectful, and then I fucked up. I lost it and told Chris he wasn't my dad and I didn't need him lecturing me, and how he thinks he could replace dad, but he'll never be half the man dad was. I was mad and just looking for something mean to say. Chris left my room, and about 30 minutes later came back in and apologized for overstepping. It was clear that he had been crying, but I was still mad and couldn't bring myself to apologize even though I knew that I should and that I didn't mean what I said. Chris left and went back to his place and we didn't talk for 3 days. 3 days later I finally did the right thing and texted him a heartfelt apology for what I had done and said, thanked him for always caring enough to be there for me, and told him I spoke with the coach about rejoining the soccer team. He texted back hours later. "Thank you, that means a lot." Since that time we've only spoken sporadically over text, whereas we used to speak all day. I've asked him if he wants to hang out, and he's always busy or he says maybe tomorrow, and then when I text him the next day he doesn't reply until it's too late. Chris has come to every soccer game I've had over the past couple of years, but he's missed the last two. I have apologized again by text. I would do it in person, but I haven't seen him since our fight, whereas normally I see him a couple times a week. One of our things has been going to see Marvel new releases together. I asked him if he wants to go next weekend and he said his girlfriend surprised him and took him this weekend. So I replied back, "Okay, maybe we can do something else together? I'd love to hang with you. I miss you." No reply yet. I know what I said was completely fucked up and wrong. Besides being a very mean thing to say, it's not true at all. He's great. I understand why he's upset, and I know it's my fault, but now I don't know how to make things better. Chris was overbearing at times, but I would give anything to go back to that right now. Is there anything more I can do to fix this? TLDR got into a fight with my older brother a couple of weeks ago because I felt like he was trying to parent me. We got into an argument and I told him that he'll never be the man our deceased father was. This hurt my brother's feelings, and things haven't been the same since. Relevant comments: you broke his heart. And I don't say that to make you feel guilty, I say that so you can understand that a text message apology is not remotely enough. You need to go to him, not wait for him to come over. You literally need to go to his place and apologize in person. OOP, you're absolutely right that a text apology is not enough for what I've done. I want to apologize in person because he deserves one. So should I just show up to his place uninvited? Because I've thought about doing that. I asked to come over before and he didn't reply until it was already late, saying he had just got home, but next time I could. Update May 23, 2019, 2 months later. I thought I would provide an update to my first post. Someone advised me to write my brother a letter apologizing, which I did. I apologized for being mean and hurtful, and that I was wrong for doing that. I also got him a separate card and wrote a message thanking him for everything he's done for me. I went to his house with my letter and card when I found out he was home to go talk to him, but unfortunately when I got there he was gone already, so I slid them under the door. When he got back home he found them and read them, and then he called me to arrange to come see me. He came over here and I apologized in person for what I said. He was very straightforward with me and honest about my actions. He explained that the reason he had been avoiding me lately is because he needed some time apart because he was beginning to not like me. He said loved me, but he didn't want to be around me sometimes. That was pretty hard to hear. He said that lately I've just not been very nice. The comment about our dad was by far the worst, but I make other snappy comments. He had tried to brush it off as me being just as a teenager, but had now decided it was best to let me know. Being a teenager is not an excuse to be a constant asshole to everybody at home, is how he put it. He gave a few examples and looking back he was absolutely right. It was pretty upsetting to hear. I know he wasn't saying it to upset me, and I was thankful that he was telling me, or at least I'm thankful now. I promised that I would check my attitude. He said a little more thoughtfulness was all I needed, and that even though sometimes I act like an asshole he knows I'm not one. After we finished talking we hugged. He told me not to forget that he loves me and that I'm great. Since then I've been trying to be more considerate. I really am trying to follow the advice he gave me. It's been a couple months now, and I'm happy to say that it's working. Our mom told me a couple weeks ago that I'm a joy to be around. In the car earlier today my brother told me that it's been really nice spending time with me lately. So that's good news. TLDR apologized to my brother for the terrible thing I said to him. He warned me that I was turning into someone that he didn't want to be around, even though he loved me. I've worked on fixing my attitude over the past 2 months, and today my brother told me it's nice to hang out with me these days. Edit. Wow, I wasn't expecting this to get big. Thanks for the advice, and for the gold. Much appreciated. Now, on to the next story, Story 4. I stopped babysitting for my Sil due to poor health. She didn't understand, and even accused me of stealing money, and even sued me for defamation. For the past 2 years, I, Aria, 33F, have been the primary babysitter for my sister-in-law Gui, 37F. Her children, Mia and Noah, were adorable, and despite Guiofir's entitled demeanor, I really enjoyed spending time with them. I recall when Mia was a toddler and Noah was a newborn. I would spend hours with them while Guiofir did whatever she wanted. I would play games with Mia, assist her with her arts and crafts, and even read books to Noah. It was a lot of fun. Even though I didn't have my own children, I became really devoted to them. However, Things began to alter a few months ago. I was diagnosed with a chronic disease, which affected me more than I anticipated. I had to dramatically change my lifestyle. I used to be full of energy, constantly doing something, whether it was running errands or assisting with family matters. But suddenly, my body couldn't keep up with the speed. I was continuously exhausted, and even basic things felt like mountains I had to conquer. The doctor gave me severe advice. I needed to reduce physical and mental stress. At first, I attempted to ignore it, hoping to get through. But it rapidly became evident that this was not something I could just dismiss. Some days, I couldn't even get out of bed without feeling absolutely exhausted. So, regrettably, I informed Gui that I would no longer be able to babysit regularly. I described everything, how my health had changed and how I needed to prioritize self-care. I wasn't seeking compassion, but rather understanding. But instead of providing the assistance I expected, Gui snapped. I vividly recall her precise words. "What do you even do all day?" It stung. I felt as though I had been slapped. But I tried to remain cool. I wasn't just lounging around all day, I was in constant pain and exhausted, which she couldn't understand. Yet here she was, making it appear that I was simply being lazy. It hurt. She went on to add that babysitting her kids wasn't even difficult, and that I was selfish for not assisting. I attempted to explain again, but reasoning with Gui is like talking to a brick block. She didn't listen. No matter what I stated, she was convinced I was exaggerating. I couldn't keep responding to her, so I decided to stop and hope she'd let it go. But she didn't. Every few days, she'd message me, wondering when I'd start babysitting again or expressing her desperate need for assistance. I felt like I was being guilted into giving in. At first, I tried to be strong and stick to my decisions. I was really concerned about my health and realized I needed to listen to my body. But after a few weeks, I began to have a creeping sensation of shame. I kept thinking of Mia and Noah. They were really sweet, and I felt like I was leaving them. It made me doubt myself. Was I being selfish? Perhaps I was simply overreacting to my condition. Perhaps I could still help out a little, just not as much as before. But then I'd remember how my body felt after overdoing it. That notion would bring me back to the facts of the situation. It wasn't only about me anymore. It was about my health, well-being, and my ability to care for myself over time. I didn't want to end myself in a worse situation because I felt guilty. In the end, Gui did not respond as I had expected. She never apologized or acknowledged how my health was hurting me. Instead, she sulked for several weeks. I didn't hear anything from her, other than the occasional passive-aggressive remark. It was difficult to deal with, but I knew I needed to keep my distance for my own safety. A month later, my husband and I received an invitation to a family dinner at my in-laws' residence. I honestly had mixed thoughts about going. I hadn't seen Gui since our last furious argument, and the prospect of her approaching me again made my stomach turn. But it was family, and I didn't want to cause any problems, so I agreed to go. I hoped things would be cordial and that Gui would have had the opportunity to reflect on her actions. Of course, that did not happen. I could feel the tension in the air from the moment we stepped through the door. Gui wasted no time making me the center of attention in the worst way possible. She greeted us with her smug look, which made me feel like she was already planning something. As we sat down at the dinner table, everyone was conversing, catching up, and generally having fun. It appeared to be a usual family dinner, until Gui decided to speak up. "So, Arya," she murmured. "Are you still too sick to help out with my kids, or is it just an excuse because you're too lazy to get off the couch?" The room went completely silent. I could feel my face burning as I struggled to remain calm. I'm not one to make a spectacle, but the comment hit me right in the gut. I had not informed my family members about my situation. My heart was beating, and I noticed everyone at the table shifting uneasily in their seats. I took a long breath and responded, attempting to keep my voice calm. "I've already explained my condition to you, Gui. It's not an excuse, I'm just trying to take care of my health." She did not even flinch. Instead, she smiled and remarked, "Health, huh? Maybe babysitting would do you some good. Get you off your pity train." She chuckled as if she had just told the best joke of the century, while the rest of the table exchanged uneasy glances. Then the rest of the family members began asking me what had happened, and I had to tell them everything. I was outraged, but I didn't want to exacerbate the situation, especially in front of my in-laws. I merely gazed at my plate and clenched my fists beneath the table. I knew I had to maintain my composure, but inside I was furious. I wanted to say so many things, like how she had no idea what I was going through and how her lack of empathy was truly mind-boggling, but I held my tongue. Fortunately, my husband was not having any of this. He rushed in and defended me before I could say anything. "Gui, that's enough," he remarked, his voice stern yet calm. "You can't talk to Arya like that. She's been through a lot, and you need to respect her boundaries." Even with his help, it appeared that the harm had been done. Gui was not one to back down lightly, and it didn't take long before she began making passive-aggressive remarks. "I just don't get it," she told me with a straight face. "It's not like I'm asking you to do anything hard. Babysitting is just watching the kids for a few hours. I don't understand what the big deal is." Everyone else at the table simply stared at their food, hoping that the conversation would cease. But it did not. Gui continued to press. "Maybe if you actually helped out, you wouldn't be so tired all the time." At this moment, I was finished. I was about to snap, but I did not want to cause a scene. So I took a big breath, feigned a smile and said, "Gui, I've already told you that I can't babysit on a regular basis right now. If you don't understand that, perhaps we should just leave it at that." She didn't say anything after that, just looked at me curiously. I attempted to dismiss those ideas and concentrate on the fact that I had stood up for myself. But it was difficult not to feel insignificant in the face of Gui's complete disregard for my sentiments. The rest of the evening was as miserable as you might expect. Gui maintained her distance, but the tension in the air was strong, and I felt unable to relax. Unfortunately, her resentment did not stop there. Oh no, it got much worse. A few days after the family meal, I was sitting at home, trying to relax after another long day, when there came a tap on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so when I opened the door, I was surprised to see a police officer standing on my porch. My heart sank into my stomach as I struggled to make sense of what was occurring. I stood there in full shock as the police officer claimed that he was coming to investigate a theft report. Apparently, Gui had filed a lawsuit accusing me of taking money from her home. The words barely registered in my head at first. A theft report? Against me? I was unable to make sense of it. I immediately called Gui to try to acquire some information. My hand shook as I held the phone to my ear, my heart thumping in my chest. The phone rang for a few seconds before she answered. "Gui," he replied. "What is going on? Why are the police at my door? Why would you accuse me of stealing from you?" She wasted no time flinging insults at me. "You think you can just ditch my kids and get away with it?" she said over the phone. "Maybe this will teach you not to mess with me. I'm not going to let you get away with anything." I was shocked. This woman had truly gone to this length to make my life miserable. The claim was ridiculous, and I couldn't believe I was actually having this conversation. But it wasn't about reason or logic for her, it was about vengeance. She appeared to be eager to go to any length to punish me for setting boundaries and asserting my rights. I tried to remain calm, but my rage was boiling over. "Gui," I muttered through clenched teeth, "I didn't steal anything from you, this is insane. Why would you even make something like that up?" But she laughed, as if she relished seeing me upset. "I'm not talking to you about this anymore," she said abruptly, hanging up the phone. I stood there in shock, staring at my phone. How could somebody be so petty and malicious? I had no idea how to digest what had just happened. The police officer was standing there, and Gui had gone as far as accusing me of stealing. Stealing. It was ridiculous, and yet here I was, forced into this nightmare. Fortunately, the police officer recognized that something was not adding up. After a little talk, he had begun to see through her tale. Maybe I was an easy target for her. But I had no motivation, no opportunity, and certainly no experience with anything like this. In fact, I had been home the whole day the money allegedly went missing, and I had a solid alibi. The officer even checked our security camera to verify my whereabouts. It wasn't long until the entire situation imploded. The officer was courteous and professional, apologizing for any difficulty and assured me that everything had been resolved. But the harm had already been done. Gui had attempted to drag me through the mud, and I had to cope with the consequences of her petty behavior. Despite the fact that I was not in trouble, the entire experience left me shaken. Her scheme backfired spectacularly. When Mark found out about the police complaint and what Gui had done, he was furious. I'd never seen him that angry before. He'd always been the calmer, more patient one in their relationship, but this was the final straw. From what I could tell, he hadn't been pleased with her recent behavior, but the theft claim appeared to be the tipping point. It felt like something inside him cracked. He marched up to her and demanded she apologize to me. Of course, Gui refused. She was too proud, headstrong, and, frankly, humiliated to accept her mistake. I only learned about all of this after Mark came to my house to apologize on her behalf. To be honest, I wasn't delighted with their relationship. It seemed strange to be caught in the middle of their turmoil. But at the same time, I felt vindicated. She had tried to ruin my life with her falsehoods, and the consequences were now catching up with her. I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief that things were finally unraveling for her. The saddest thing for Gui was when news of the police report reached the school where she worked. Gui had been a teacher for years, and I believe she had always assumed her position was secure. However, after the school learned about the fabricated theft claim and the participation of the police, things began to fall apart for her in a dramatic manner. While no legal charges were filed against her, the fact that she had contacted the authorities in such a petty and vindictive manner was enough to ruin her reputation. I couldn't help but feel bad about how much I enjoyed watching her life collapse. I knew it wasn't polite to enjoy someone else's demise, but after everything she'd put me through, it almost felt justified. It was as if the cosmos was finally serving her a dose of her own medication. For so long, she moved around with a sense of entitlement, as if the world revolved around her. And suddenly, everything was falling apart. Of course, none of this was without consequences for me. As much as I wanted to move on and leave this mess behind me, it seemed like every time I took a step forward, I was drawn back into the drama. I began to feel sorry for the folks in our family who were caught in the middle, trying to decide which side to take. A few family members felt sorry for her and suspected that I had exaggerated or misread her intentions. But for the most part, they supported me. Still, there were awkward occasions at family gatherings when I had to act as if nothing was wrong when, in reality, things had gotten exceedingly strained. Gui's life has fallen apart, and it appears that she is blaming everything on me. She lost it during another one of our family confrontations, pointing her finger and yelling that I was to blame for everything that had gone wrong. She exclaimed that if I hadn't been so theatrical during babysitting, none of this would have occurred. It seemed as if everything that had gone wrong in her life was now my fault. But I had already learned to maintain my composure. I did not participate in the yelling match. Instead, I answered calmly, "Gui, I didn't make you mock me at dinner. I didn't force you to file a false police report. You did this to yourself." It felt strangely empowering to speak those words. For once, I was not going to let her twist the story or make me feel like I was wrong. I won't lie. As I watched her spiral, I felt a little sense of justice. Seeing someone so toxic face the repercussions of their actions seemed natural, even if I didn't take joy in her suffering. I'd endured enough of her harshness. I had to tell myself that this wasn't some small victory for me. It was merely the result of her own actions. The fact was, I never wanted to be a part of this drama in the first place. I merely requested some space to concentrate on my health and well-being. But Gui interpreted that request as a personal attack. Everything that followed, her allegations, lies, and attempts to tarnish my reputation, was entirely her doing. I was not the one who escalated things. But I wasn't going to back down. Gui no longer talks to me, and honestly, I'm perfectly okay with that. If she cannot respect my boundaries, we cannot recover our relationship. I've realized that certain individuals are simply not intended to be in your life, no matter how close you were before. I have moved on from the drama and am finally at peace with it. The only thing I regret, if you can call it that, is the impact this entire situation has had on her children. Mia and Noah were completely innocent throughout all of this, and I have always loved them as if they were my own. I remain hoping that kids will grow up to be kinder and more understanding than their mother. I do not want children to inherit her bitterness and venom. However, the situation does not end here. Gui now faces serious consequences for making a fraudulent police report. I honestly didn't expect her to be held accountable, but it appears she is being investigated for making a fraudulent allegation. It appears that she may be required to pay a fine or face some type of penalty. Frankly, it could not have occurred to a more worthy individual. I'm not sure what the legal implications will be for her, but it appears that she'll have to deal with it one way or another. Of course, even as the walls close in on her, she refuses to accept responsibility for her deeds. Gui began calling me in an uncharacteristically out-of-touch manner. She's actually asking me to pay her fine. Yes, you read that correctly. She wants me to pay for the mess she made, as if I owe her anything after everything she's put me through. It's truly comical, and I'm just sitting here shaking my head. At first, I had no idea how to reply. It's not like I want to go back and forth with her. Every time we communicate, I feel like I'm taking a step back in my healing journey. But this was different. This was her attempt to manipulate me one more time. And I was not having it. I've spent the last 2 months focusing on myself and regaining my peace. And this phone call felt like a slap to the face. She had no right to ask for anything after how she treated me. But then she brought her children into it and attempted to make me feel bad. I don't know what to do now. Do you have any suggestions? Update 1. Hello, folks. I know some of you have asked about my condition, And I'd like to clarify that I don't feel comfortable posting too many specifics about it here. I hope you understand. But I will admit that it causes me to feel physically weary pretty quickly. I'm still getting used to it, and it's been a challenge. I'm learning to pace myself, but it's not always simple to explain, especially given other people's expectations. A couple of you also wondered how I ended up babysitting for Gwai, so I thought I'd tell you a little bit about it to provide some perspective. Several years ago, I lost my job. To be honest, I had a difficult time. I'd been working in a tough capacity that frequently left me feeling burned out. After losing that job, I was at a crossroads, wondering what to do next. I didn't want to rush into another full-time job that would be equally hectic, so I decided to take some time to figure things out. Around that time, I acquired a part-time remote job that proved to be a true blessing. It's flexible, pays well, and I can work from home, which gives me more control over my schedule. Honestly, it's been a terrific balance that I've been able to maintain. Even though it is only part-time, my husband has an excellent job, which helps. We've been able to maintain a decent financial situation together, so things worked out, even though it wasn't the job route I had planned. Now that I was working from home and had more spare time, I began looking for activities to occupy my days. That's how I ended up babysitting for Gwai. You know, Gwai and I have always been related, but our relationship has had its ups and downs. She's not the easiest person to get along with, but when I lost my job, I had a lot of free time and figured I could help out with her kids. It began when she had to leave for a trip with her pals and her regular babysitter canceled at the last minute. She asked if I could step in, and I agreed, despite my reservations about the concept. I assumed it would be something transitory, but it eventually became my second job. She kept asking me to babysit, even when she wasn't on a trip. Her children, Mia and Noah, are wonderful, and I actually enjoy spending time with them, so I didn't fear it. But this is when things began to become difficult. What began as a courtesy quickly became something that seemed like an obligation. Gwai grew to rely on me more and more, and before long, I was babysitting on a regular basis. I didn't mind at first, but after a while, it felt like I was doing it for her convenience rather than out of a real desire to assist. It wasn't long before I was juggling a part-time job with babysitting, which was okay when I was feeling well. However, when my situation began to worsen, I felt stretched too thin. Looking back, I can't help but wonder whether I should have established boundaries earlier. I guess I wanted to be the kind, helpful family member who could do everything. However, in the end, it left me exhausted. It's acceptable to say no. Even if someone else is vying for your time and attention, it is okay to prioritize your own needs. Update 2. Hello folks, I realize it's been a while, but I finally have some updates. First and foremost, I'd like to thank everyone who contacted out and offered support during the crazy situation with Gwai. It's been a bit of a roller coaster, but I'm doing fine now. So here's where things are. Gwai did wind up paying a fee for filing a fraudulent police report, which surprised me given how swiftly it happened. She was further warned that repeating such behavior could result in more serious repercussions. To be honest, I'm glad she had to face some consequences for the disaster she created. It seemed like justice. However, I am not exactly celebrating it. I believe Gwai would prefer to pretend nothing happened and go on, but that isn't how this works, right? The more shocking development, however, involves Gwai and Mark. They are now separated. That came as a tremendous shock to the family. I never imagined it would come to this, but things definitely reached a breaking point for them. Mark was enraged when he learned about everything Gwai did, especially the phony report. That was the last straw for him, and it wasn't long before they began living apart. They have been working on their relationship, however. According to what I've heard, they're in counseling, and Mark appears to want to attempt to make things better. I'm not sure what will happen to them in the long run, but there's still a chance they can work things out, if both of them are ready to put in the effort. At this point, I've removed myself from their drama. It's difficult to care when you've been wrongfully accused of something you didn't commit. Gwai still blames me for all that transpired. She refuses to speak to me, which is actually rather reassuring. I don't think I could take much more of her toxicity. There's just so much a person can take until they have to keep their own peace. And right now, I'm doing everything I can to focus on my health and happiness. But, matter how toxic things were, I felt horrible for her. I understand her actions were the result of her personal problems, but that doesn't excuse what she did to me. I learned the hard way that just because someone is kin does not imply they have your best interests in mind. Even if you strive to help them, some people will manipulate and take advantage of you. And at some point, you must draw a line. The fact that I can no longer see Mia and Noah has made things a little more difficult. I miss those children. They were an important part of my life for a long time, and despite the difficulties with Gui, I actually enjoyed spending time with them. They're both brilliant and sweet children. It's weird not to be a part of their life anymore. I know they miss me, but I'm not sure if I'll see them again. Gui has made it clear that she wants nothing to do with me, and I do not want to overstep my boundaries. Update 3. Hello, everyone. I know it's been almost a month since my last update, but I finally have some new content for you. A lot has happened, and I feel like I've been on a roller coaster recently. Thank you to everyone who has reached out to me. Your warm words and support mean everything to me. So, let us start with Gui and Mark. Believe it or not, they're back together now. Yeah, I was startled too. Given all that had happened, the drama, the accusations, and everything else, I assumed that was the end of their relationship. However, they managed to resolve the situation. It's bittersweet for me. As glad as I am that they are finding a path forward, I still haven't seen Mia or Noah. Honestly, I miss those children. I spent a lot of time with them, and they became an important part of my life. But with everything that happened, I can't seem to find a way back into their life. I know Gui has made it clear that she no longer wants me connected, and I do not want to break any limits. But I can't stop feeling like I'm losing out. I still think about them all the time and hope they are doing well. On a personal note, my illness has deteriorated in recent weeks. I won't go into too much detail, but let's just say I've been battling more physically. I was doing okay for a while until I had some flare-ups that brought me down. It's been a challenging few weeks, and there were times when I wondered how much longer I could continue. I was fatigued, and there were days when getting out of bed seemed impossible. I've been seeing my doctor more often and changing my treatment plan. Slowly but surely, I'm feeling better. But, I'm not going to lie, there's an underlying concern that things could turn terrible again at any point. I simply need to take it one day at a time and be gentle to myself. I'm grateful that my hubby has been so supportive throughout this. He's been an incredible rock for me, and I'm not sure what I'd do without him. Anyway, that's where I am right now. I'm grateful for the help I've received, and I hope everyone is doing well. I'll let you know if anything more happens, but for now, I'm simply taking it one day at a time. Thank you again for being there for me. It truly means the world. Now to the next story 5. At Thanksgiving, my sister discovered I had $12 million and my family demanded I give it to her, claiming she deserved it more. Hello everyone, before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let us keep this channel growing collectively. Thank you very much. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons, with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. So I'm Sarah, 38, female, and I need to get this off my chest. Do you know those family dynamics in which one child can do no wrong while the other appears to be invisible? Yes, welcome to my life. Everything was very typical until I was 8. I was an only kid, and while my parents were not particularly warm and fuzzy, they were present, I suppose. Mom would help me with my homework, and Dad would occasionally take me fishing on Lake St. Clair. We weren't the Brady Bunch, but we were fine. Then came the night that would change everything. I recall my Aunt Kelly showing up at 2 a.m. and telling me to pack a suitcase because Mom was in the hospital. My sister, Rachel, was on her way, but something was wrong. She wasn't meant to arrive for another 2 months. The following few weeks were a flurry of hospital visits and hush chats. Rachel was really little. She looked like one of my baby dolls, but with all these tubes and cables, I wasn't allowed to touch her or get too close. That was the first time I felt it, an invisible wall forming between me and the rest of my family. When they eventually brought Rachel home, our house turned into a sterilized bubble. Mom had an obsession with germs. I'm talking industrial strength disinfection throughout, hand sanitizer stations in each room, and constant cleaning. The harsh odor of bleach still causes me distress to this day. But here's the bit that really messed me up. Whenever I showed the slightest symptom of illness, I was whisked off to either Grandma Marie's or Aunt Kelly's house. I mean every time. Sneeze once, pack your bags. A mild cough, you're off to see Grandma. At first, I thought it was enjoyable. Grandma Marie would make cookies, and Aunt Kelly had a fantastic collection of Nancy Drew books that I was working my way through. But children are not stupid. After a while, you begin to understand what is actually going on. You are not being sent away on adventures, you are being handled as a threat. As if your entire existence could damage your beloved sister. I tried everything to gain their attention in a healthier manner. Honestly, everything? Got all A's? Mom would scarcely look up from Rachel's most recent doctor's appointment calendar. Won first prize in the scientific fair with a project about renewable energy. Dad just asked if I could store the display board in the garage since Rachel is allergic to cardboard dust. Is this even a thing? The real kicker came when I was 12. For months, I'd been practicing for the school talent show, teaching myself to perform Bridge Over Troubled Water on the piano. I know it's a little too obvious. Rachel had a 99.1 degree Fahrenheit fever on the night of the show. Guess who did not have anyone in the audience? Meanwhile, 2 weeks later, the entire family, including both sets of grandparents, attended Rachel's 15-minute flute recital, during which she essentially killed hot cross buns. Rachel immediately learned how to use the system. By the age of 7, she had outgrown any real health difficulties, but that didn't stop her from performing. Headache? Must remain home from school. Feeling tired? Someone else, guess who, should perform her tasks. Worried about a test? Mom would literally call the school to have the deadline extended. I began spending more and more time in my room, immersed in books about art history and antiques. It's funny how life works out sometimes. My room became my sanctuary, mostly because Rachel claimed she was allergic to my lavender air freshener, so it was the only place she wouldn't go. Do you know what is actually wrong? When she pretended to be sick, a part of me felt grateful. At the very least, I'd be taken to Grandma Marie's, where someone would ask about my day or be interested in what I was about. Grandma was the one who sparked my interest in vintage jewelry. She had an incredible collection of costume pieces that she let me organize and catalog. I suppose I should have regarded it as prophetic. The worst thing wasn't even the clear favoritism. It was how they rewrote history to excuse their actions. Rachel just needs more attention because she had such a rough start. Sarah's always been so independent. Sarah understands that her sister has special needs. Number I did not comprehend. I was a child who didn't understand why having a good immune system made me less deserving of love. Looking back, I can see how these years shaped me. The persistent message that I was somehow unsafe or inconvenient to be around doesn't just go away. But hey, at least it taught me to be self-sufficient. When no one checks your homework or cares about your triumphs, you quickly learn to be your own cheerleader. High school, the majority of people either loved or loathed it. Me, I regarded it as a ticket out. While Rachel was establishing her drama empire in middle school, I was laying the groundwork for my own escape. And let me tell you, nothing inspires you to accomplish more than knowing that no one will do it for you. Remember how I said I spent hours sorting Grandma Marie's jewelry collection? That taught me a valuable lesson: the need for systematic organization and attention to detail. In high school, I approached everything with the same perspective. My desk at home resembled something out of an organization magazine: color-coded notes, meticulously organized study plans, and everything had its place. Rachel teased me about it, calling me Rain Man. Very great, sis. But here's the thing about being invisible: no one is monitoring your failures or successes. So do whatever the heck you want. I joined every club that would not interfere with my part-time employment at Carson's Diner. Thank you to Carol, the owner, for remembering my birthday when my own parents had forgotten. Debate team? Check. Who is the National Honor Society president? Check. Who is the editor-in-chief of the school newspaper? Check. The debate team was when I truly found my voice. There's something quite rewarding about shattering someone's argument while maintaining complete composure. It also taught me how to negotiate, which I didn't realize at the time but would be useful later. I've won states twice. Rachel had major soccer games, therefore my parents were unable to attend both competitions. She was on the C team, did not even play. The game changer the junior year was when things truly became interesting. I took the SAT and received a flawless score. Not like, oh, pretty good, perfect. I mean, perfect. 1600. You know how many people receive that? Less than 1%. I remember staring at the results screen for almost 20 minutes, convinced it was an error. I rushed home to tell my parents. I realized this is stupid. Mom was in the kitchen assisting Rachel with her English homework. The conversation went something like this. My reaction: Mom. Look, I got a perfect SAT score. Mama. That's nice, honey, but can you keep it down? Rachel's trying to concentrate. She has a big test tomorrow. Rachel, you're correct. Yeah, some of us actually have to study, Miss Perfect. She said. Rachel, sweetie, don't stress. You're just a different kind of learner. I still have the hard copy of those SAT results someplace. Never got pinned on the fridge. But Rachel's C+ in English? That infant received primo refrigerator real estate, complete with a "we're so proud of you" magnet. College applications. The college application procedure was interesting. I applied to 15 schools without informing anyone. I wrote all of my own essays, gathered my own recommendations, and handled all of the financial assistance paperwork myself. My guidance advisor, Mr. Chen, was the true MVP. My parents were too busy to help me with the FAFSA, so I stayed late after school. Then acceptances began to arrive. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Michigan, and each one comes with a scholarship offer. I stored them all in a locked box under my bed, knowing what would happen if Rachel discovered them. They'd suddenly shifted their focus entirely to her. But if Sarah goes to Harvard, I'll be all alone. Or some nonsense like that. The day I received my full ride offer from UMich, Rachel joined JV cheerleading. Guess which one was celebrated with a family feast? Hint, I had microwave mac and cheese in my room while they went to Olive Garden. But, you know what? The scholarship was my golden ticket. Tuition, lodging and board are all included, as is a book allowance. I could finally leave that house, where I was either invisible or inconvenient. The day I received my acceptance package, I went to my favorite spot in the local library, a fourth-floor window seat overlooking the park, and grieved for an hour. Not sad tears. There were tears of relief. When I told my parents at supper that I was going to UMich, they were ecstatic. He said, "Michigan? But that's so far. What if Rachel needs you?" She replied, "I hope you're not expecting us to help with expenses. Rachel's cheerleading competitions are very costly." Rachel is crying. "Oh my God, finally. Can I have your room? I need space for my TikTok videos." The summer before college I worked double shifts at Carson's Diner to save money. Carol, bless her heart, always gave me additional tips and made sure I got to take home leftover pie at the conclusion of my shifts. She also taught me a vital skill, how to recognize genuine people in a society full of fakes. "Baby," she'd tell me, "in diners and in life, the ones making the most noise usually have the least to say." Move-in day at Michigan? My folks couldn't attend because, surprise, Rachel had a cheerleading competition. Aunt Kelly drove me instead, helped me set up my dorm room, and gave me a $500 envelope. "Your Grandma Marie wanted you to have this," she told me. "She's so proud of you." Later, I learned that Grandma had been saving that money from her Social Security checks for months. That first night in my dorm room, I promised myself, I was going to create such a wonderful life that being overlooked would be inconceivable. Not for vengeance. Nothing to prove to my family. But what about the 8-year-old girl who used to get sent to Grandma's house for sneezing? College and the beginning of something new. College went by in a flurry of all-nighters, instant ramen, and heavenly independence. I graduated summa cum laude from the University of Michigan. Not that my folks noticed. They were too busy helping Rachel transfer to her third college in 2 years. But this is where the plot takes an unexpected turn. I got an entry-level job at Everett and Phillips Auction House in Detroit. I won't use the real name for obvious reasons, but if you're in the business, you probably know who I'm talking about. A genuine high-end establishment, many old money clients, that type of transaction. I began with their estate sales business, which involved documenting the belongings of wealthy individuals after their deaths. Not exactly glamorous, but it paid the bills. The breakthrough. My first several months were very standard, logging countless china sets, categorizing vintage furniture, and so on. Next followed the Kingston estate. Mrs. Kingston was an elderly widow who had died with no children, leaving behind what everyone assumed was a huge collection of costume jewelry. Rooms filled with the material? This is where those hours at Grandma Marie's came in useful. I'm looking through this stack of jewelry when something catches my attention. It's an Art Deco brooch. Nothing really showy, yet something about it felt different. The weight was unsuitable for costume jewelry. The clasping mechanism was far too complex for a copycat. I believe I spent my whole lunch break that day researching old jewelry markers and signatures. I ended up staying late at the office to use the company's membership to several antique jewelry databases. The more I looked, the more certain I got that this was not costume jewelry. It was the real stuff. Problem was, I was the new girl. Nobody would believe me if I claimed we had a potential treasure on our hands. So I did what the debate team taught me. I meticulously prepared my argument. I spent 2 weeks during lunch breaks and evenings learning everything I could about Art Deco jewelry authentication. I even used some of my pitiful excuse for savings to pay for an online gemology course. Finally mustered the guts to approach my boss, Mr. Harrison. I brought the entire presentation, which included comparative images, historical documentation, and the works. The conversation went something like this. My response: "Sir, I think we might have something significant in the Kingston collection." Harrison, scarcely looking up from his phone, says, Sarah, we've already cataloged those as costume pieces. You are correct. I know, but look at these maker's marks. They match perfectly with Cartier's 1925 signatures. Harrison, finally paying attention. Where did you learn all of this? My reply was, I did some research. Long story short, the costume brooch sold for $47,000 at auction. It turns out that it was part of a limited collection created for some European set in the 1920s. But here's the real kicker. Harrison started to trust me after that. He began giving me other artifacts to authenticate. Suddenly, my pointless pastime of sorting antique jewels acquired real significance. I devoted myself to learning everything I could about vintage jewelry. I took every online course I could afford. I spent weekends at estate sales, researching items. Even began a small notepad to document various authentication procedures. My apartment looked like a jewelry scholar's fever dream, with walls covered with printouts of vintage hallmarks and certification guidelines. The auction house started getting results. I was discovering important items that others had overlooked, developing contacts with collectors, and knowing the market. My commission checks became larger. For the first time in my life, I was not simply surviving, I was also saving money. Family? Still remarkably uninterested. At Sunday dinners, which I still went to like a fool, the discourse went like this. Mom. Sarah's still at that antique shop, right? This is me. Auction house, and yes. Actually, I just authenticated a rare Tiffany piece. Rachel interrupts. Oh my God, speaking of jewelry. You guys have to see this charm bracelet I bought at the mall. But I didn't care anymore. For once in my life, I had discovered something wholly mine. Something I was actually excellent at. Something unrelated to being Rachel's sister or family disappointment. The Rothschild collection. Then came the Rothschild collection. This was about 2 years into my employment at the auction business. A massive estate. Old money family. There's a lot of buzz in the industry. I was part of the team that cataloged their jewelry collection. And that's when I noticed it. A fairly commonplace Art Nouveau piece that everyone else had missed. I spent 3 days investigating it. I barely slept. It turned out to be a piece from a famous French jeweler's private collection, which was supposed to have been lost during World War II. When it sold at auction for $238,000, Harrison summoned me to his office. I believed I was being promoted. Instead, he said something that completely changed the situation. Sarah, you're wasting your talent here. You should be running your own authentication business. Initially, I shrugged it off. Me? Start a business? With what money? However, the notion took root. I began doing modest freelance authentication projects on the side. Word spread that I had a terrific site. Private collectors began contacting us directly. One night, I was sitting in my modest apartment, surrounded by jewelry manuals and authentication tools that I had gradually accumulated, when I had an epiphany. This is something I could actually do. I could create anything on my own. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I took out a large debt against my car. I emptied my savings account. I rented a small office space in a less desirable area of town. People believed I was insane. Perhaps I was. I transformed a storage room above a Chinese restaurant that was about the size of a college dorm room. The rent was low because it always smelled like Kung Pao chicken, and the Wi-Fi only functioned if you sat in the corner by the window. But it was mine. The struggle. The first few months were interesting, and by interesting, I mean scary. I'd awaken at 4 a.m. with cold sweats, calculating how many months till my savings ran out. Loan payments felt like a rope around my neck. My office furnishings comprised of, I purchased a card table from Goodwill. A chair I literally found on the curb. Don't worry, it was thoroughly cleaned. However, in the world of high-end jewelry, reputation and contacts are everything. And my experience at the auction house provided me with both. I started small by doing authentication work for local antique dealers. My fees were lower than the larger organizations, but my attention to detail was becoming known. Word spread. 6 months later, a watershed moment occurred. A dealer I had dealt with at the auction house inquired about a collection of Victorian-era brooches. The owner requested confirmation before selling. It turned out to be a massive collection, with pieces from 3 generations of families. I worked on it for 2 weeks straight, rarely sleeping and documenting everything. I discovered 2 extremely rare pieces that had been misinterpreted as later replicas. The owner was so delighted with my detailed analysis that she not only paid my fee, but also offered me a 10% commission when the piece sold. Was that a commission? $86,000. More money than I had earned in the preceding 2 years combined. Suddenly, my phone rang. A lot. Private collectors have heard about my knack for finding missed pieces. Estate lawyers seeking advice on inherited jewelry. Even my previous auction house began sending me authentication work. I'm quite sure Harrison was secretly helping spread the news. Thanks, boss. Scaling up. By year 2, I'd hired my first employee, Jenny, a fresh gemology graduate who reminded me much too much of myself at that age. She was extremely intelligent, yet she was neglected since she was quiet. She is now my head of authentication and is well worth her weight in gold. The firm expanded quicker than I could have predicted. Moved to a proper office downtown, goodbye, Kung Pao chicken odor. Created a team of specialists. I've earned a reputation for finding misplaced items. You wouldn't believe how many important historical jewelry items get misinterpreted as costume jewelry in people's attics. Keeping it secret from my family. However, success came with its own set of obstacles. The bigger we became, the harder it became to keep it a secret from my family. They still thought I worked in an antique shop. Rachel would make these sarcastic remarks during family dinners. Rachel asks, "Sarah, I have some old jewelry I was going to donate to Goodwill. Maybe your little shop would want it?" Me, having just authenticated a $1.2 million Fabergé item that morning. "Sure, I'll look into it." Mom continues to introduce me to everyone as my other daughter. She works with old jewelry or something. Meanwhile, I was quoted in Forbes, luckily under my company name, and we had recently built our third office. What's strange about it? Keeping the secret became almost enjoyable, like this private joke with myself. I'd sit at Sunday dinner in my Target discount outfit, really Chanel, listening to Rachel speak about her entry-level marketing job, knowing I'd just closed a deal for more than her annual income. I even started playing tiny games with myself, such as wearing authentic Harry Winston pieces to family gatherings and seeing whether anyone noticed. They never did. Rachel once spent 20 minutes showing off her expensive $200 Michael Kors watch. I was wearing a vintage Patek Philippe that cost more than her automobile. Managing growth. However, the real challenge was managing growth. By year 5, we'd established offices in Detroit, Chicago, and New York. I spent more time on airplanes than in my own bed. We built a reputation for discretion. It turns out that many wealthy people want their jewels verified without the rest of the world knowing. The money was enormous. For example, we needed to hire a large team of financial advisors. Nonetheless, I maintained a relatively modest lifestyle. I purchased a nice, but not flashy house in a desirable neighborhood. I drove a high-end, but not obvious car. The only place I truly splurged? My home office. Advanced authentication equipment. The most effective security system money can buy. A custom-built vault to make Fort Knox envy. What's with the irony? They believed I was being frugal by aiding them. Mom would remark things like, "It's so sweet of Sarah to help out, she must be eating nothing but ramen to manage it." Meanwhile, I had just validated a collection, which earned me a commission greater than their mortgage. You know what's strange about success? The more you have, the more difficult it is to explain to others who have always perceived you as inferior. It's like explaining color to someone who has only seen black and white. They lack the necessary context. By this stage, my company was doing really well. We had the Midwest's high-end jewelry authentication industry cornered, and our reputation was solid gold, pun intended. But every Sunday, I'd travel to my parents' house for dinner, playing Sarah, the modest antique shop worker. The cognitive dissonance was becoming ludicrous. I'd spend my mornings on conference calls with Dubai collectors, my afternoons authenticating million-dollar pieces, and my evenings at my parents' house in carefully chosen normal clothes, eating Mom's overcooked pot roast while Rachel dominated the conversation with stories about her latest marketing triumph. Usually something like bringing her boss's coffee without spilling it. A defining moment. One Sunday is very memorable in my mind. I had just completed a huge transaction, authenticating a missing Cartier piece that had been resting in someone's safe deposit box for 40 years. Was it just the commission? 7 figures. I drove directly from the meeting to my parents' place, still euphoric from the successful authentication. She said, "Sarah, honey, is everything okay? Your clothes are looking a bit worn." "Oh, trying to save money," I said, wearing a $3,000 cashmere sweater that I had purposefully chosen for its subtle appearance. Rachel responded, "Well, if you'd gotten a real job instead of playing with old jewelry. Your dad." "Rachel, be nice, not everyone can be as successful as you." I almost choked on my pot roast, trying not to laugh. The anonymous transfers monthly payments to my parents began about this time. Aunt Kelly informed me that they were struggling to pay Rachel's educational loans and medical bills. Mom casually stated that they might have to sell the house. I couldn't let that happen. Despite everything, it was still the home I grew up in. So I initiated an anonymous monthly transfer of $5,000 to their account. When asked, I said I was giving $1,000 by living on rice and beans. They imagined the rest came from Aunt Kelly or another family. Rachel, of course, claimed responsibility for inspiring family members to help. Watching Rachel spend my money. The money was helpful, but it also had unexpected consequences. My parents began treating me with a strange combination of sorrow and patronizing pride. As if I were some kind of noble poverty case, sacrificing everything to support the family. Meanwhile, Rachel's spending became more extravagant. She'd arrive for dinner with new expensive bags, claiming they were outlet finds. They weren't. I can recognize a genuine Gucci at 20 paces. She began taking extravagant vacations and bragging on Instagram about her fortunate life. I'm very convinced she used my support money for shopping sprees. However, I remained silent. The irony was simply wonderful. The MBA drama. Then came the college fund drama. Rachel revealed that she wants to return to school for her MBA. Another private university, of course. Only the best for the golden child. Mom contacted me in tears, explaining how they couldn't afford it. I say, maybe Rachel could look at state schools? They have good programs too. My mother. Oh honey, you don't understand? Your sister needs to maintain certain standards. But, speaking of assisting, may I increase my monthly contribution for a few years? I increased it to $7,000 per month. My accounts were unaffected. But witnessing them compliment Rachel for taking initiative with her education, while presuming I was living on ramen to help out, that stung a little. The actual kicker? I was giving a guest seminar at the same business school Rachel wanted to attend. My family didn't know that. The dean personally invited me to give a lecture on luxury goods authenticity and business growth. I had to come up with an excuse as to why I couldn't attend Sunday dinner that week. My own achievement started to feel like a distinct life. As if I were some kind of corporate superhero with a hidden identity. By day, I was running a multi-million-dollar authentication business. By night, well, on Sunday evenings, I was just Sarah, the disappointed daughter who worked at an antique shop. The breaking point, Thanksgiving. The weight of the untruth was becoming heavier. Rachel made rude remarks about my career on multiple occasions. Each time Mom apologized to her friends for my modest lifestyle. Every time Dad suggested I get a real job. I believe I always knew it would end dramatically. I just didn't expect it to implode so spectacularly on Thanksgiving. It began 2 weeks before the holiday. Mom called, weeping about her back discomfort. She had been diagnosed with a herniated disc, and the notion of cooking Thanksgiving dinner for 20 guests overwhelmed her. Now, I'd like to tell you that I offered to help purely out of goodwill. But really? I became tired of pretending her dried turkey was appetizing. My response, why don't I handle the food this year? I can have it catered. She replied, oh honey, we can't afford a caterer. My response, don't worry about the cost. I've been saving up. Mom, concerned. You're not taking out a loan, are you? I coordinated everything with a high-end catering firm that I use for business gatherings. They do incredible work, the kind of food that makes you wonder why you ever bothered to prepare yourself. It cost more than my folks thought I earned in 2 months, but whatever. Thanksgiving morning dawned, and I was feeling quite good. I had my laptop with me because I needed to monitor a major online auction in Hong Kong. This magnificent Art Nouveau necklace was for sale, and I had a customer who was interested in authentication if they won the bid. The lunch arrived on schedule, and everything was properly prepared. Rachel, of course, had to respond. Rachel inquired. Store-bought stuffing? Really, Sarah, Mom's is so much better. This is from the girl who once set off the smoke alarm while making toast. Mom was apologizing to everyone for not cooking herself, but you could tell they were enjoying the meal. Rachel shut up after tasting the maple-glazed Brussels sprouts, which, by the way, cost more per plate than her weekly grocery budget. I stepped away from supper and dessert to check my laptop. The auction was getting intriguing, and I needed to be prepared in case my client won. I set up in my old bedroom, which Mom had kept the same since high school. In the meantime, Rachel's room had undergone 3 renovations. That's when everything went wrong. I had left my authentication program running, with many tabs open that displayed various accounts and current agreements. Rachel came in without knocking, some things never change, to borrow my phone charger. She saw my laptop screen and realized this was her chance to finally expose how pathetic her older sister was. Rachel, smirking. Let's show everyone what Sarah's really been up to. Before I could stop her, She took my laptop and walked into the dining room. The big reveal: picture this. 20 people, including aunts, uncles, cousins, and my parents, filled with gourmet turkey and half drunk on pricey wine, which they mistook for Trader Joe's. Rachel's reaction. Time to see what kind of important work Sarah's doing on Thanksgiving. She flipped the laptop around triumphantly, apparently intending to disgrace me with whatever minor antique transactions she assumed I was working on. The room went completely silent. You could hear the fancy clock I got Mom for Christmas ticking silently. She believed it was a reproduction. My screen displayed, current account balance, $12.4 million, pending authentication contract, $485,000. Recent transaction, $1.2 million, Hong Kong auction, company's quarterly profit report, $4.2 million. Rachel's face shifted through 5 different emotions in 3 seconds. The final one landed somewhere between astonishment and nausea. She actually swayed slightly on her feet. Rachel whispers, "This cannot be right." She said. "Rachel, honey, what is it?" Rachel, voice cracking. She's rich. Sarah's rich." Chaos ensues. If it was possible, the hush deepened even farther. Then Mom began giggling, really laughing. She said, "Don't be silly. Sarah works at that little antique shop." I rose up carefully, straightening out my basic cashmere sweater, which cost more than their monthly mortgage. "Me? Yes. Actually, Mom, I own one of the largest jewelry authentication companies in the country. For years. Those antique shop comments? I authenticate pieces worth millions. That little business you never asked about? It has offices in 3 cities." Dad choked on the liquor. Aunt Kelly dropped her fork. Uncle Mike began coughing terribly. Then Mom's laughing transformed into something else. Her face turned red, then purple. She stood up so quickly that her chair tumbled over. Mom screams, "You have millions, and you let us struggle?" My response. "Struggle? I send you $7,000 every month." She replied. "While sitting on millions? Your sister has student loans." So there it was. Instead, congratulations. Not, "Wow, we're so proud." Just outraged that I hadn't given them more money. Rachel began to cry. Surprising, I know. Sobbing about how she deserved to know, and how I had betrayed the family. Dad joined in. My dad. "How could you be so selfish? We're your parents. We raised you." That was when I lost it. Years of being disregarded. Years of dismissal. Years of being considered as a family disappointment. Everything poured forth. My response. Raised me? You shipped me off to grandma's every time I sneezed. You missed every achievement, every award, every milestone, because Rachel might feel left out. You never saved a penny for my college but took out loans for her private school. And now, you're mad that I built something for myself. The following 5 minutes were chaotic. Mom screamed about family obligations. Dad is yelling about ungrateful children. Rachel alternated between sobbing and demanding to know just how much money I had. Meanwhile, the fancy catering team attempted to serve dessert while seeming exceedingly uncomfortable. I grabbed my laptop, took my Hermes bag, which Mom had previously commended as a nice replica, and walked out. Behind me, I could hear Mom discussing how to spend my money, something about Rachel's MBA and a new car. As I went home in my sensible automobile, a limited edition BMW, my phone started filling up with texts. The family group chat burst. Rachel began posting on Facebook about hidden family wealth and selfish siblings. The aftermath. The days after Thanksgiving were like watching a cyclone hit in slow motion. Except that the hurricane represented my family and the debris symbolized my sanity. Let's start with SMS messaging. Within 1 hour of leaving supper, my phone had 47 missed calls. More than 200 messages. Mom followed this intriguing progression. 7:42 p.m. How dare you walk out on family? 8:15 p.m. We need to talk about this like adults. 9:03 p.m. Your sister deserves a share of your success. 10:30 p.m. I've already called a realtor about houses in better neighborhoods. 11:45 p.m. Why aren't you answering? This is your mother. Meanwhile, Rachel had become a full-fledged social media fighter. Rachel, on the other hand, had fully embraced social networking. She wrote an enormous rant on Facebook about how her millionaire sister had been hoarding wealth while watching her beloved family struggle. The comments section was insane. Distant cousins and former high school classmates, whom I hadn't spoken to in years, suddenly formed strong ideas about my moral character. But this is the bit that really grabbed me. Rachel actually posted, all those years of me trying to help Sarah's career, giving her advice about moving up from that little antique shop, and she was secretly wealthy. The betrayal hurt so much I nearly threw my phone across the room. What was the only career advice she ever gave me? I suggest I try selling jewelry on Etsy. If you're unfamiliar with the term, flying monkeys occur when toxic family members send others to guilt trip you. Aunt Susan, whom I saw maybe once every 3 years, called to inform me that family is everything. Uncle Bob, who I'm pretty sure still believes I'm 12, emailed me a lengthy lecture on the importance of sharing wealth. Even my third cousin's wife's sister, how did she acquire my number, felt compelled to express her thoughts on family obligation. But the real fun began when they arrived at my workplace. I arrived in on Monday morning to find Mom, Dad, and Rachel sitting in our reception area. They informed Jenny, my receptionist, that they had an appointment for authenticating services. Rachel clutched her Michael Kors bag as if it was genuinely worth something. The conversation went about as well as one would expect. Your mother. We've discussed it as a family. I said. A family discussion, without the family member you're discussing. Mom, ignoring me. And we think it's only fair that you set up trust funds for everyone. Rachel responds. I need at least $2 million to start my new life properly. Dad said. And your mother and I would like to retire. We're thinking a beach house in Florida. This is me. Did you miss the part where I've been sending you $7,000 monthly? Rachel responds. That's nothing compared to what you have. You owe us. You're thinking, I owe you? For what, exactly? The years of being ignored? The missed graduations? The constant comparisons? Mama. Don't be dramatic, Sarah. We gave you everything. My response. No. I gave myself everything, and you know what? I'm done. Right there in my own office lobby, I took out my phone and canceled the monthly transfers to their account. Mom gasped as if I'd slapped her. Rachel began her phony crying performance, but quickly stopped when she saw it wasn't working. Then things became ugly. They refused to leave. I had to contact security. Seeing my 60-year-old mother being dragged out while yelling about ungrateful children was bizarre. Jenny asked whether I wanted to press charges. I said no. However, I did have their names placed on the building's do not admit list. The harassment lasted for weeks. New telephone numbers. Fake email addresses. Even tried to contact me through my company's customer service. I finally had to issue a formal legal notice, threatening harassment charges. Mom then played her final card. She called Grandma Marie, but here's the thing about Grandma Marie, she is wiser than all of them together. How did she respond? Good for Sarah. About time someone in this family succeeded on their own terms. Mom did not speak with her for 2 months after that. It has been 6 months since Thanksgiving. I relocated to a new home, with better security. I changed all of my numbers. What about the company? We are doing better than ever. It turns out that my family problems attracted several high-profile clients who respected my caution in the circumstance. Rachel continues to write passive-aggressive updates about toxic wealth and family betrayal. According to what I've heard, she is beginning her own jewelry authentication firm. Good luck on that. Mom and Dad finally stopped trying to contact me when my lawyer wrote them an official letter outlining how the harassment charges would affect their lives. They're now informing everyone that they never wanted my money anyway, and that they're praying for my salvation. What's the best part? For the first time in my life, I feel liberated. No more Sunday dinners full of sly insults. No more downplaying my accomplishments to spare their feelings. No longer financing for the Rachel show. My therapist believes I am finally establishing healthy limits. I say, I am finally living authentically. So, that is my story, Reddit. Thanks for allowing me to share it. Special thanks to the catering firm, who sent me a Christmas letter stating that the Thanksgiving meal was the highlight of their year. Edit, responses to common questions. Yes, I am still in treatment. No, I do not regret cutting them off. Yes, Grandma Marie is doing well. She's coming to visit next month to help me catalog a new collection. One last thing. To Rachel. I know you're probably reading this. What about the Cartier bracelet you're wearing in your most recent Instagram post? Definitely a fake. Just saying. Now to the next story 6. My parents kicked me out on Thanksgiving for not paying for a vacation. A month later, they asked for help after my brother lost $25,000 gambling. This is our thanks for your little support, they stated. I told them I stopped paying the bills and fled, but they laughed. A month later, Thanksgiving was meant to be about family and giving thanks. Instead, my father looked me dead in the eye in the middle of supper and told me, "You have to leave." I froze, fork halfway into my mouth. What? My mother avoided my gaze. My younger brother and sister kept their heads down, pushing food around on their plates as if they were trying to disappear. My father, on the other hand, appeared serene, as if he'd already made up his decision. "This is our gratitude for your small assistance," he remarked, shaking his head. I gave out a quick laugh, believing it was some sort of strange joke. "What the hell are you talking about?" My father reclined back in his chair, arms crossed. "You're not pulling your weight, Jack. You've been here for months, and we don't see much help from you." I stared at him. Am I not doing my fair share? I had been living with them for a few months, but I wasn't just sleeping on their couch. I held a full-time job. I bought groceries not only for myself, but for everyone. I paid for takeaway when they didn't want to cook. I also paid my younger siblings' internet bills because they required them for school. And it doesn't include the times I provided my father with petrol money or auto maintenance when he grumbled about being short. I wasn't anticipating a prize, but being told I wasn't contributing at all? This was ridiculous. I scoffed. "Are you serious? I've paid for stuff." "Not enough," my father interrupted. "You're a grown man. You should take care of yourself." And that's when it struck me. It wasn't just about me staying at their house. This was about the talk we had a few days before. They had asked me to pay for the vacation. Not just a weekend getaway, but a full-fledged luxury resort with flights. They wanted me to pay for the entire thing. At first, I assumed they were joking. When I learned they weren't, I said no. My father's face darkened, and my mother gave me this look as if I had personally offended her. After that, things got weird. They stopped talking to me so much, and now they're kicking me out. I breathed slowly. "So this is about the vacation, huh?" My mother pursed her lips. "Jack, family supports each other." I laughed. "Yeah. And what exactly have you done to support me?" My father threw his hand down on the table. "Enough. If you're not willing to help, then you can leave. Simple as that." I shake my head. "Fine, I'll go." I gazed between them. "And I'm done paying for everything. No more groceries, no more bills, no more helping out." That made my father giggle. "Go ahead, loser. See how long you last." I gazed at my younger siblings. My sister was staring at her plate. My brother would not look at me. Nobody would stand up for me. That night, I packed my belongings. It did not take long. I hadn't really settled back in. I'd always assumed this was only temporary. I discovered a cheap place in the neighboring town. Not fantastic, but mine. Then, for a month, nothing. No calls, no texts. I assumed they had washed their hands of me, and I was comfortable with that. Until one night the phone rang. I noticed my mother's name on the screen. I nearly didn't answer it, but something told me it wasn't a random call. Something wasn't right. It had been a month since Thanksgiving and I hadn't heard anything from them. Not a single call. Not a single text. At first, I kept checking my phone, expecting my mother, or perhaps my sister, to contact me to see how I was doing. Nothing. I told myself I didn't care and was better off, but it still hurt. I had spent months assisting them, ensuring my younger siblings had what they required, and paying for items without being asked. And once I stopped, it was as if I never existed. But, after a while, I started to like the silence. My apartment was small and shabby, and I could hear my neighbors through the thin walls, but it was mine. Nobody asked me to pay for their groceries. No one expects me to pay their expenses. For the first time in months, my paycheck lasted. I could purchase something for myself without feeling guilty. Then, suddenly, my phone rang. I had just sat down with a plate of leftover takeout when I saw my mother's name flash across the screen. I simply stared at it for a second, perplexed. They hadn't called me since I left, not even to see whether I was still alive. And now, suddenly, they're reaching out. For a second, I considered ignoring it and sending it to voicemail. But something felt off. I sighed and responded. "Hello?" There was a pause on the other end. Then my mother's voice came through, quieter than normal. "Jack. We need your help." I nearly laughed. "Now you need my help? What, did your vacation plans fall through?" I asked, not trying to mask my sarcasm. She did not respond. Instead, she simply replied, "It's Ryan." That made me sit up. "What about him?" She paused. I could hear muted voices in the background, my father shouting something I couldn't understand. Then she explained, He lost $25,000. I felt my stomach drop. He what? He gambled, she acknowledged. I ran my fingers across my face. Ryan was barely old enough to drink, much less gamble. But $25,000? That was more than just a few $100s in poker losses. This was serious. How the hell did he even get that kind of money? I requested an explanation. He borrowed it, she explained. Her voice crackled slightly. I closed my eyes. Jesus Christ. And now, she went on. He owes it all back. And we don't have it, Jack. We're completely out of money. I sat back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. A month ago, they laughed in my face when I declared I was done paying for everything. They had kicked me out on Thanksgiving. And now they're desperate for my assistance since my foolish brother has gotten himself into a huge debt. It would have been so easy to hang up on them and tell them it wasn't my problem. Allow them to deal with it. But, despite everything, I couldn't. Ryan might have been foolish, but he was still my brother. And if he did borrow that much money, it was not from a bank. This was horrible. I breathed slowly. I'm coming over. My mother's voice was filled with relief. Thanks, Jack. I didn't respond. I simply hung up, grabbed my keys, and walked out the door. I had no idea what I was entering into. But I knew that this was only the beginning. The drive back to my folks' place felt odd. I hadn't been there since the night I left, and I never expected to return so soon. The neighborhood looked the same. Even in late December, a few houses still had Christmas lights up. The same old beat-up automobiles sat in the drives. Everything was exactly as I remembered it. However, it felt different. I pulled into the driveway and sat there for a while, clutching the steering wheel. Part of me wanted to turn back and drive away. But I sighed, exited, and proceeded to the front door. Before I could knock, my mother opened the door. She appeared weary. Jack, she sighed. Come in. I stepped inside. The house smelled the same, like cinnamon air freshener and whatever cheap candle my mother always bought, but the energy was utterly different. Ryan was seated on the couch, stooped over and staring at the floor. My father stood at the dining room table, arms crossed, appearing angry. Nobody spoke for a second. Then I asked, all right, someone tell me what the hell happened. Ryan did not look up. My mother sat next to him and caressed his back like if he were a young child who had just skinned his knee. My father was the one who reacted. Your brother was an idiot, that's what happened. Ryan eventually spoke, and his voice was quiet. I didn't mean for it to get this bad. I stared at him. How do you accidentally lose 25 grand? He let out a nervous breath. It started small. Just a couple hundred. Then I won big, so I kept going. He eventually looked up at me, his face pallid. And then I lost everything. I shake my head. Okay, but you didn't have 25 grand to lose. So who the hell gave you the money? Ryan paused. My father responded for him. He took out a loan. Something about how he said it made my stomach turn. What kind of loan? My mother spoke up calmly. Not a bank loan. I felt my jaw tightening. So, what? Some backroom loan shark? Nobody responded, but their quiet revealed everything I needed to know. Jesus Christ. I squeezed the bridge of my nose. Okay. And when exactly is he supposed to pay this back? End of the week, my father mumbled. I let out a slow breath. And you have nothing? My mother shook her head. We're already maxed out on our credit cards, we don't even have enough for next month's rent. I leaned against the wall and took everything in. A month ago, they declared me a loser and kicked me out. They were now drowning in debt, desperate, and looking to me for help. I had the money. Not all of it, but I'd been saving since I moved out. I could handle at least half of that. But, should I? They had completely abandoned me. My father had literally laughed at me as I walked out the door. But Ryan. He was different. Yes, he'd been a jerk, but I could see fear in his eyes. If he owed money to the wrong people, this was more than just a lesson to learn. It was risky. I breathed sharply. I can cover some of it. My mother gave a sigh of relief. My father said nothing. Ryan only nodded, his gaze fixed on the floor. I'll wire you 12 grand, I announced. That's all I can do. My mother grabbed my hand. Thank you, Jack. I drew away. Don't. Just make sure this never happens again. I turned to Ryan. And you? You're going to pay me back, every damn cent. He gulped heavily. I will. I did not believe him. But I'd deal with it later. For the time being, I had simply bailed them out. Even though I knew I shouldn't have, I couldn't help but wonder if this would make a difference. Little did I know how incorrect I was. I wired the 12 grand that night. My mother nearly sobbed. My father whispered what I believe was a thank you, but he couldn't look me in the eye. Ryan only nodded, still looking sick to his stomach. I did not remain after that. I made it clear that this was a loan and not a gift. And Ryan would repay me. Nobody argued. As I drove back to my apartment, I reminded myself that I had done the right thing. It was not about my parents. It was about Ryan. He was my brother. And, as much as I wanted to let them all sink in the disaster they'd created, I couldn't stand by and watch Ryan get harmed over something silly. A week has gone. Then 2. Then a month. And nothing. Ryan had not sent me a dime. No calls. No texts. Nothing. I waited and gave him the benefit of the doubt. Perhaps he was back on his feet. Perhaps he was working things out. Then one day I broke down and called him. He responded after a few rings. "Hey, Jack." I got straight to the point. "Where's my money?" There was a pause. I don't have it yet." I clenched my jaw. "You said you'd pay me back." "I will," he replied promptly. "I just need more time." I scoffed. "More time? Ryan, it's been a month. You haven't even sent me $20. He became quiet. I could hear background noise, possibly from a video game. He wasn't even working, right? I felt my patience crack. "You're screwing around, aren't you?" "No, I'm trying, man, I'm just..." I cut him off. "I don't care about excuses. I bailed you out. I didn't have to, but I did. And now you're just ignoring it?" "I'm not ignoring it," he exclaimed. Things have been hard, okay?" I laughed bitterly. "Yeah. Well, things are gonna get a lot tougher if you don't start paying me back." Silence. I exhaled. Whatever. Just figure it out. So I hung up. I expected something after that. 100 here, 50 there, whatever. Still, nothing. A week later, I decided to ask my parents instead. If they had the money to bail Ryan out, they could help him repay me. Right? So I called my father. As soon as he responded, I went to the point. "Hey, I need to talk to you about Ryan's debt." My father gave a frustrated sigh. "What about it?" "He hasn't paid me anything, not a dime." "So?" I halted. "What do you mean, so?" "You gave him the money. That was your choice." My hold on the phone intensified. "It wasn't a gift." My father gave out a dry laugh. "Well, that's your problem." I believed I had misheard him. "Excuse me?" "You chose to help him," my father said, as if explaining something to a child. "That's on you. Don't come crying to us about it." I was surprised and didn't know what to say at first. "Those were your exact words," I finally said. "Family helps each other," you said when you kicked me out. "But now that I need support, that no longer applies." "Jack, you're an adult," he continued, his voice stern. "Now handle your own problems." I gave a quick laugh. Wow. So, if you need money, family helps each other. But when I need, I'm on my own. "That's life," he remarked dismissively. "Don't you like it?" "Too awful." I felt sheer wrath rise up my spine. They asked me to come back. They begged me to save them. And as soon as they got their way, they abandoned me. "Got it," I replied coldly. "Enjoy your life, Dad." I hung up. I sat there for a minute, staring at my phone, trying to understand how deep their selfishness went. That's when I realized something. I wasn't about to let this go. Not this time. They assumed they could walk all over me. They were about to learn how mistaken they were. I sat in my apartment, staring at my phone and repeating my father's words over and over. Handle your own concerns. That is life. They genuinely felt they could just use and discard me. That I would continue playing their game. Keep bailing them out while they trample all over me. They didn't know who they were dealing with. I wasn't about to let this go. I spent the following few days contemplating. If Ryan didn't pay me back, and my folks ignored it, I needed another way to receive my money. And then an idea struck me. One so basic, I couldn't believe I hadn't thought of it sooner. I could still access my folks' Wi-Fi and cable accounts. I had set them up while I lived there, and the bills were always in my name because I was the one who paid for them. And guess what? They never updated the billing information after I departed. So I logged in and canceled everything. The internet is gone. Cut off the cable. Streaming services are disabled. They were officially off the grid. I sat back, waiting. Sure enough, my mother called the next morning. "Jack," she replied, agitated. "The internet's down." I pretended to be clueless. "Huh, that's odd." She sighed. "Could you look into this? Your sister has schoolwork, and we can't even watch television." I smiled. "Oh, I already know what happened." "What?" "I canceled it." Silence. "You what?" She finally spoke. "I canceled everything. Internet, cable, Netflix, and whatever else you were using is no longer available." "Jack," she gasped. "Why would you do that?" I slumped back in my chair. "I'm not sure, maybe because I'm still paying for it?" "But, your sister needs it for school." "Then maybe," I responded slowly, "you should pay for it yourself." I could hear my father in the background. "What is going on?" "Jack canceled everything," my mother hissed. "Good," my father said. "We don't need him." I laughed. "Yeah. Let's see how long you can do without Wi-Fi." My father grabbed the phone from my mother. "Listen, you little..." I hung up. This should have been the end of it. But I didn't know what would happen next. A few days later, when I got home from work, something seemed off. My apartment's door was unlocked. I always locked the door. Always. My stomach twisted as I gradually pushed it open. Then I saw it. My apartment had been wrecked. Cushions were thrown everywhere, my laptop was missing, my drawers were ripped open, and my television was gone. I stood there shocked. And then it struck me. This was not a random break-in. This was them. My family had broken into my house, and I'd just declared war. My heart pounded as I stood in the middle of my destroyed flat. My laptop is gone, my television is gone. Drawers were pulled open, clothes were flung everywhere. I clenched my fist. I know who did it. This was not a random break-in. This was them. I have my own family. I took a big breath and called the cops. When the officer arrived, he took one glance at the mess and inquired whether I had any suspects. I did not even hesitate. "I think my parents and my brother did it." He raised an eyebrow. "Family?" I nodded. "I used to live with them. They kicked me out, and now we're not on good terms." I detailed the entire thing: money, Wi-Fi, and debt. They most likely assumed this was vengeance. The cop took everything down. Then he posed the big question. "Would you like to press charges?" I paused. Not because I had reservations. But it was a major thing. If I filed charges, this would not be just a family drama. It'd be real. But then I thought about it. They'd broken into my house, stolen from me. After I helped them out. After I assisted them while they were deeply in debt. And the worst part? They presumably assumed I would do nothing. That I would simply accept the hit. As I always do. I met the officer's eyes. "Yes," I answered. The next day, the cops arrived at my parents' house. I was not there. But I got a call from my mother shortly after that. "Jack," she was practically screaming. "What did you do?" I slumped back in my chair. "You broke into my place. You stole my belongings. What the hell were you expecting?" "It wasn't a big deal," she responded. You just what?" I snapped. "Taught me a lesson? Did you take back what you believed you deserved? Tell me, Mom, do you even feel horrible about this?" She became silent. Then, in a low voice she added, "You didn't have to call the cops." I laughed. "Oh, so if I help you, I'm family, but when you rob me, I'm expected to let it go." "It wasn't robbery," she argued. "The cops disagree." She huffed. "Jack, we can fix this? Simply drop the charges." "No." Her breath caught. "What?" I said no. She gasped, like if I'd slapped her. "Jack, this is serious? Your brother..." "I gave him 12 grand, I snapped. "And he still hasn't paid me back. Now he's breaking into my home? I'm finished." Silence. Then she made one last move. The guilt trip. "Are you really going to do this to your own family?" I took a deep breath. "No, Mom. You did it to yourself." So I hung up. The cops discovered my television and laptop at a local pawn shop. Sold under Ryan's name. That's all they needed. Ryan was caught for burglary, and my parents were charged as accomplices. My grandparents discovered out shortly after. And that's when things changed. Because they were infuriated. For the first time in my life, my parents were about to experience genuine consequences. I didn't attend the court proceedings. I did not have to. The proof was incontrovertible: pawnshop records, surveillance footage, everything. Ryan pleaded guilty, perhaps believing he would get off lightly. My parents tried to justify that they had no idea what he was doing, but no one purchased it. They all received probation. No prison time. But now they had a criminal record. And it was their problem. Not me. The true repercussions occurred when my grandparents found out. I'm not sure who told them, probably one of my aunts, but when I received a phone call from my grandfather, I could tell he was furious. "Jack," he asked in a raspy voice, "is it true? Did your parents or Ryan steal from you?" "Yes," I answered. "It's true." There was a prolonged pause. Then, gently, he stated, "They will regret it." I'm not sure what happened after that. But my grandparents went to war. They absolutely cut off my parents. There will be no more aid with the bills. There will be no more covering up for them when they make mistakes. My father had always counted on them when things became bad. But now, he was on his own. And the icing on the cake, my grandparents repaid me every single cent that Ryan owed me. They said they did not want me to bear that load. That I'd done more than enough. And they made one thing very clear. They were not doing this for my parents. They were doing it because I was the only one in the family who had performed ethically. That was the last time I spoke to my folks. Ryan texted me a half-hearted apology a few months later, possibly because my mother compelled him to do so. But I did not answer. After all of this, I realized something. I had spent years attempting to assist people who would never aid me in return. And I was finished. Since now, I was not anyone's savior, not their safety net, not their ATM. I was going to live my life for myself. And if my folks get in trouble again, they could manage it on their own. Now to the next story. 7. My sister falsely accused me of stealing $110,000 at her wedding. Later, I presented video evidence of her infidelity, shocking everyone. The wedding day exceeded everyone's expectations. My sister Elizabeth looked stunning in her couture gown, and her now husband Brian appeared to be the happiest guy alive. Everything went flawlessly, including the vows, champagne toasts, and dancing. If there was any tension, I couldn't feel it, at least until the night after the wedding. The family had gathered at my parents' house to unwind and discuss the big day. We were in the middle of discussing amusing incidents from the dance floor when Elizabeth stood up suddenly. Her voice shook as she spoke something that struck me like a truck. "John stole our honeymoon money, a $10,000. It's gone." The room went silent. I could feel everyone's gaze shift to mine. My mind couldn't comprehend what she had just stated. Stole? Me? That was absurd. Elizabeth went on and on before I had a chance to respond. She described how sad she was, how she had been crying all day, and how she felt betrayed. Brian sat transfixed, as if he'd been hit by a freight train. My parents, on the other hand, acted quickly to help her. "John, how could you do this?" my mother asked, shaking her head with disappointment. "You ruined everything. Steal from your sister? Your own sister?" "Dad," the speaker added, "you're not welcome here anymore." I tried to stand out and emphasize that I had not touched a cent. I said that I had been at the front desk all night, in full view of everyone, and that I had no idea where the money was stored. Brian, to his credit, appeared dubious, stating, "I don't think John would do something like that." But Elizabeth wouldn't have it. "Stop defending him, Brian," she demanded. "He's lying. I can't believe you take his side over mine." "John, you're disgusting. Get out of my sight." I was stunned. Her outrage was not simply about the alleged theft, it was also personal. My parents joined her in informing me that I was no longer a member of the family. My father said, "You are no longer our son." Which was the final blow. I exchanged glances with Brian, who appeared as perplexed as I was, and then went. As I drove away, I started putting things together. I understood exactly why she was doing this. It wasn't about the money, but about our granny. Grandma had made it plain a few months ago that she intended to leave most of her money to me. She trusted I would utilize it carefully and preserve the family legacy. Elizabeth, the self-proclaimed golden child, was enraged. She had attempted to persuade Grandma that she deserved the money instead, but it had not worked. Elizabeth was determined to make me look like a bad person as Grandma's health deteriorated. It was her method of sabotaging me. I was angry, but I knew it wasn't over. If she was going to play dirty, I could play even dirtier. I had a secret of my own, one I'd guarded to protect Brian. Elizabeth had been cheating on him for several months. I hadn't intended to expose her, but after what she had done, all bets were off. I began to plot my retribution. Following that night, I couldn't quit thinking about what Elizabeth had done. The treachery hurt, but what hurt even more was that my parents trusted her without question. I couldn't look at my phone since the family group chat was filled with messages about how I had let everyone down and how humiliated they were of me. It was as if Elizabeth turned a switch, and I became the family evil. But I wasn't about to let her win. Elizabeth believed she could destroy me and walk away untouched. What she didn't realize was that I had been hiding a bombshell for months. Back in August, I unexpectedly caught her with someone other than Brian. I had gone to a coffee shop in the next town to see a friend, and there she was, sitting at a corner table, holding hands with someone I didn't know. They weren't very subtle, kissing, laughing, and acting like a real couple. I didn't say anything at the time since, frankly, it was none of my business. I expected it to come back and bite her eventually. I just never anticipated to be the one who had to bite back. Now I wanted proof. Something substantial, something undeniable. I knew her routine well enough. She'd always claimed she was visiting a friend or running errands when she went missing for a few hours each week. It was obvious what she was up to. My best guess was Thursday, around 7 p.m. That appeared to be her normal window. So I parked down the street from her house and waited. Sure enough, just around 6:45, Elizabeth went out, got into her car, and drove away. I followed her from a safe distance so she wouldn't notice. She returned to the same coffee shop where I had seen her before. The guy waited for her in the parking lot. I parked discreetly across the street and began recording. They hugged and then kissed. And not just a short peck, this was the kind of kiss that made it apparent Brian wasn't even a thought in her mind. They entered and sat near the window, looking like a couple on a lovely date. The man continued leaning in close, stroking her arm and talking into her ear. Elizabeth ate it up. I captured the entire event, 7 minutes of great film that would throw the issue on its head. When they finally left, I made sure to photograph them hugging again before they got into separate cars and drove out. I waited until she had left before driving home. My heart was hammering all the way home, but it wasn't from nerves, but from anticipation. I knew I had something that could destroy her flawless little facade. But I wasn't about to hurry into it. I needed to wait until the appropriate moment. Elizabeth had gone nuclear on me during a family function, so it was only right that I return the favor. I decided to schedule a dinner a few days later and pretend to apologize and make amends. My parents, still upset at me, reluctantly agreed. Elizabeth accepted without hesitation, possibly believing it was her chance to embarrass me even further. She had no idea what was about to happen. The days leading up to the dinner were agonizing. I remained perfectly silent, even as Elizabeth continued to scold in the family group chat about how some individuals refused to accept responsibility for their acts. Naturally, my parents ate it up. Every time I read a text from them saying something like, "We are so proud of you, Elizabeth, for handling this with grace," I wanted to scream, but I remained calm. I knew it would be worthwhile. The morning of the meal, I texted everyone in the family group chat, including Brian. I mentioned that I wanted to meet for dinner and clear the air. "I owe everyone an explanation," I had written. "And I need to apologize, especially to you, Brian." My mother responded immediately, saying they'd be there, but I'd better have a solid excuse for what I'd done. Elizabeth responded with a snide remark about how she hoped I was ready to confess. Brian's response was brief and neutral, just a thumbs up emoji. Perfect. Everything was falling into place. I spent the day getting ready. I loaded the video onto my laptop and checked the quality to ensure it was satisfactory. I also printed screenshots in case someone accused me of fabricating the video. When I arrived at my parents' place for supper, I felt as if I were entering a battle, and I was prepared to win. When I stepped in, the atmosphere was strained. My parents scarcely greeted me, and Elizabeth sat at the head of the table, smug as usual. Brian stood next to her, quiet and reserved, as he had done since the accusation. I wasn't sure if he felt I'd taken the money, but he was certainly keeping his thoughts to himself. We all sat down, and I started by taking a deep breath. First of all, I want to say that I'm sorry for how things turned out. I know you're all angry with me, and I understand why. But I've been thinking about everything that's happened, and I realize there's something I should have said sooner, something I've been holding back. Elizabeth moved forward slightly, her eyes full with expectation. She undoubtedly felt I was about to confess. My mother and father just looked, waiting. Brian appeared uncomfortable. I took out my laptop, placed it on the table, and opened the video file. "What you're about to see is not easy to watch," I told you. "But I think it's important for everyone here to know the truth." Elizabeth's arrogant face broke for the first time as I hit play. The room went hushed as the video began. It shows her walking up to the guy in the coffee shop parking lot, hugging and kissing him. The date in the coffee shop, the way they couldn't take their hands away from each other, and the final shot. Them hugging again in the parking lot before driving away. After the video concluded, there was silence for a few seconds. Then Brian said, "Who the hell is that?" he inquired, his tone harsh. Elizabeth's face reddened. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words emerged. "Answer him," I said. "You accused me of stealing, of tearing this family apart, when all along you were the one who was lying. This isn't your friend, is it? How long has this been going on?" Elizabeth stammered, but Brian did not wait for her response. He pulled back his chair and stood up, his expression a mix of fury and disbelief. "You've been cheating on me?" he asked. "The whole time I was working my ass off to give you the life you wanted, the house, the car, all of it, for this?" My parents looked like they were hit by a vehicle. My mother looked at Elizabeth, her voice cracking. "Elizabeth, is this true?" Elizabeth finally got to speak. "It's not what it looks like," she remarked, but no one believed her. "This will be a lesson for you, Elizabeth," I remarked as I stood up. "You started this war. All I did was finish it." Brian grabbed his keys and departed without saying anything more. My parents, still shocked, turned against me. "How could you do this to her?" my father asked. I responded. "She accused me of stealing $10,000 to make me look bad, and I'm the bad guy for showing the truth? You should ask her how far she's willing to go to cover up her lies." I did not wait for a response. I grabbed my belongings and fled. I didn't want to hear any more excuses. They sought a villain, and they now have one. But this time, it was not me. After dinner, I didn't hear from anyone in my family for many days. No texts, no phone calls, and no attempts to explain or apologize. It was radio silence. I assumed they were trying to clean up the mess Elizabeth had made. Brian was the first to contact out, and he was not even a family member. He contacted me 2 days after the dinner, and I was shocked that he wanted to talk. I assumed he was upset with me for unexpectedly catching him off guard, but he didn't seem angry. "I just wanted to say thank you," he remarked. "For being honest. I wish it hadn't come to this, but I'm glad I know." We talked for a bit, and he told me he had already begun making plans to move out of the house he shared with Elizabeth. He further stated that he had canceled their trip to the Maldives and stopped making payments on the car he had promised to purchase her. "She can figure out her own life now," he joked. I asked him if Elizabeth had tried to contact him since dinner. "She's been blowing up my phone, begging me to understand," he told me. "But there's nothing to understand. She cheated. End of story." Hearing him say that gave me an odd feeling of closure. At least someone in this mess could see clearly. A few days later, my mother finally contacted me. She sent me a long guilty text message about how upset she was in me for ruining Elizabeth's relationship and how family should always be there for each other, no matter what. I stared at the message for a moment, trying to decide whether it was worth responding to. Finally, I sent a simple response. Family supports each other by telling the truth, not by covering up lies. Maybe you should think about that. That did not go over well. My father responded with a note telling me I was being immature and that Elizabeth was still their little girl, regardless of what she had done. That was ridiculous. They were willing to forgive her cheating and manipulative behavior because she was their favorite. Meanwhile, Elizabeth remained silent. No words from her. I wasn't sure if she was too embarrassed to talk or if she was plotting her next move, but I didn't care. She had lost her fiancé, her free trip to the Maldives, and probably the majority of the sympathy she had received from my parents. However, I couldn't ignore the notion that this wasn't over. Elizabeth was not the sort to accept defeat. If she was quiet, it was because she was planning. And I was not wrong. A week later, she moved. I awoke one morning to a flurry of texts from mutual friends and extended family. Elizabeth had apparently started spreading a new tale, claiming that I had set her up to ruin her wedding and harm her relationship. She said that I had been following her for weeks, hoping to catch her slipping, and that the film was a desperate attempt to retaliate against her for exposing the alleged crime. It was ludicrous, but the damage had been done. Some individuals bought her story, particularly those who did not know the full story. They began contacting me, calling me nasty and hateful. Others, thankfully, saw through her lies and informed me that they believed me. But I wasn't about to sit back and let them dominate the story. I had all of the proof, including the video, screenshots, and texts. If she wanted a public fight, I was prepared. But before I could make a move, something unexpected occurred. Brian stepped in. He sent a lengthy letter on social media, explaining everything: the adultery, the charges, the dinner, and even my role in revealing the truth. John didn't ruin our relationship, he wrote. Elizabeth did that all by herself. He just showed me what I needed to see. If anyone has a problem with him, take it up with me. The post went viral among our close friends and relatives. It shut down the majority of Elizabeth's supporters overnight. People started contacting me, apologizing for jumping to conclusions. Even my parents stayed silent for a while, perhaps understanding how horrible they looked for taking her side so easily. What about Elizabeth? She doubled down. Her next move would push things to an entirely new level. Elizabeth's next move was both bold and dumb. She attempted to sue me for slander. Yes, you read it correctly. She actually hired a lawyer and filed a lawsuit, alleging that I purposefully harmed her reputation and caused her severe distress. When I was handed the documents, I couldn't determine whether to laugh or be outraged. She wasn't just desperate, she was insane. I did not waste any time. I hired my own lawyer, showed them the video, the texts, and Brian's social media posts, and they assured me that I had nothing to worry about. This is a fear technique, they said to me. But if she wants to go to court, we'll go to court. So we did. The court date was approximately a month later. The majority of the family showed up, likely out of morbid curiosity. Brian was also there, sitting quietly in the back. Elizabeth appeared with her lawyer, all smug and cocky, as if she had already won. The judge was not impressed. Her lawyer claimed that I maliciously taped and circulated private footage of Elizabeth, causing her to lose her relationship and social position. But my lawyer instantly shut it down. They emphasized that the footage was recorded in a public place and depicted behavior that directly contradicted Elizabeth's earlier charges against me. They also pointed out that I had only seen the film to our immediate family before Elizabeth's lies made the situation public. Then came the finest part. Brian took the stand. He stated that Elizabeth accused me of stealing without evidence and attempted to isolate me from the family. He said that the video was the only way he discovered the truth about her infidelity. John didn't ruin anything, he explained. He saved me from wasting my life on someone who didn't respect me or our relationship. Elizabeth's lawyer attempted to cross-examine him, but Brian did not flinch. He kept to the facts, leaving little opportunity for interpretation. When it was Elizabeth's turn to testify, her story fell apart. She contradicted herself multiple times, claiming at one point that the man on the video was simply an acquaintance and at another that she and Brian were on a break at the time. The judge didn't buy any of it. By the end of the hearing, it was obvious where things were going. The judge dismissed the complaint, concluding that I had not defamed Elizabeth and that the facts I submitted was both true and important. But the real kicker was when the court chastised Elizabeth personally. "You have wasted this court's time with baseless accusations," she told the jury. "It is clear that this lawsuit was an attempt to deflect blame for your own actions. I urge you to reflect on the decisions that led you here today." Elizabeth exited the courtroom in tears. Following that, the tables were turned. My parents, our extended family, and even her closest friends would have nothing to do with her falsehoods. Brian ended all communication and finished the process of moving out. My parents, humiliated and ashamed, eventually recognized they had made a mistake by siding with her. When my father contacted me one night and said, "We made a mistake, I hope you can forgive us one day," it was a quiet admittance rather than a spectacular apology. I promised him I would think about it, and I meant it. After everything they had put me through, forgiveness was not going to come easily. Elizabeth has completely disappeared from the family scene. She relocated out of state a few weeks later, claiming she needed a new beginning. According to what I've heard, she struggled to keep friends and a job. Since then, her reputation has followed her, as it should. I'm not going to pretend that this entire affair hasn't left scars. Yes, it has. But, in the end, the truth won out, and I was finally free of the cloud Elizabeth had attempted to cast over me. I do not regret exposing her. She began the war, and she has paid the price. Now to the next story 8. My wife changed after a work trip, then I discovered her therapist was an old friend who convinced her to cheat and ruined our marriage. I noticed a difference in my wife, Carla, about 6 or 7 months ago. She had just returned from her company's annual trip, which was organized by her manager to assist their team reunite and build their bonds. Usually, she returned from these excursions energized, full of anecdotes about her coworkers and eager to share minor experiences that had amused or inspired her. This time, things were different. Her temperament has changed noticeably since the day she returned home. She didn't discuss much about the vacation, which surprised me. When I questioned whether anything had happened, she simply shook her head and dismissed my fears. At first, I attributed it to the usual post-trip fatigue. Maybe she was just exhausted from all the traveling, socializing, and team-building activities. But even after a few days, her behavior remained the same. In fact, things worsened. Carla became angry with me, starting disputes over little matters that would not have disturbed her in the past. Before, my wife and I rarely fought. Our relationship was always healthy. But suddenly, the accustomed calm gave way to strain. Every day, it was as if she was hunting for reasons to dispute, and these disagreements seemed to arise out of nowhere. A comment that would have made her chuckle suddenly resulted in a sigh, or, worse, a fight. I couldn't understand where this sudden fury and frustration was coming from. It was no longer just the disputes. My wife began to isolate herself in different ways. We had a weekly date ritual, which could be as simple as getting coffee or going for a lengthy walk in the park. These outings were meaningful to us because they provided us with a chance to reconnect, unwind, and focus on one another away from the distractions of work and daily life. But Carla began canceling our dates with increasingly dubious explanations. She would complain about being too tired or having too much work to catch up on, even on weekends. My concern grew as the cancellations increased. I missed spending time with my wife, our connection, and our laughter. Her mood swings become increasingly pronounced. She appeared fine one minute and then became moody and withdrawn, retreating within herself. Of course, my mind wandered. I began to worry that she was losing interest in me, or, worse, that she had fallen in love with someone else. I didn't want to think about it, but her behavior seemed so strange and out of character that I began to contemplate options I hadn't considered before. When I eventually approached Carla with my fears, she was emphatic, insisting that there was no one else but me. She even gaslighted me, claiming that I was overthinking things and that she simply needed time to straighten things out in her life. So I attempted to give Carla some space, believing that whatever she was going through would resolve itself with time. I figured if I didn't press her and just gave her space to breathe, she'd eventually come around and things would return to normal. But, sadly, it did not occur. In fact, the more room I gave her, the farther away she appeared to float. She started working longer hours and came home late, sometimes after I had gone to bed. In general, she would tell me stories about her day, hilarious anecdotes about her coworkers, or complain about the current office drama. Now there was only silence. After she returned home, she became increasingly evasive when I tried to question her, and her acts began to create concerns in my mind. With our relationship on unstable ground, I recommended to my wife that we seek marriage therapy. I hoped that with the help of a counselor, she would be able to open up to me and we could figure out what was causing our disconnect. To my astonishment, Carla declined, stating that she wanted to visit a therapist independently and that she needed to focus on herself before we could work on our relationship together. While it didn't meet my expectations, I agreed. Ultimately, I wanted her to feel supported in any manner she needed. Carla soon found a therapist and began meeting with them 3 times a week for 2-hour sessions. I didn't ask too many questions about it, assuming she'd found someone qualified to help her. All I wanted was for her to achieve the clarity and calm she was looking for, and for us to be able to reconnect. Carla appeared to be in a better mood following each session, lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. I hoped that this was a sign that things would get better between us, that this was the start of a new chapter in our relationship. Instead, things became stranger. Carla began spending more time away from home, frequently making plans without me. It began with a few evenings here and there, but it quickly spread to almost every weekend. She'd go without much of an explanation and not return until late at night. I don't mind if she goes out with her buddies. In fact, I've always pushed her to pursue a life outside of our marriage. But I expected her to give me a heads up. Her frequent and sudden absences, along with her failure to keep me informed, made me feel neglected in my own marriage. Meanwhile, Carla appeared unconcerned about the fact that I missed spending time with her, no clue of how much I craved our former intimacy. What troubled me even more was when I realized, almost unintentionally, that my wife wasn't only spending time with friends on her little adventures. Apparently, she was also hanging out with random strangers she met at bars. This was something she had never told me. I only discovered out after several of my friends expressed worry. They had seen her at bars, dancing with strange men, apparently intoxicated and acting in ways that were entirely out of character. They'd recognized her as my wife. It was humiliating to learn of my wife's behavior secondhand, knowing that others were watching her behaviors while I remained in the dark. I was absolutely confused, dealing with the embarrassment and uncertainty that her behavior had caused. When I finally built up the courage to bring it up, hoping for an open discussion about what was going on, she rejected my concerns. She waved them off, explaining that she was just having fun and that dancing and talking to strangers did not imply that she was doing anything inappropriate with them. She said it as if her activities in meeting these strangers were insignificant, as if I shouldn't be touched by this version of herself that I scarcely recognized. Then she stopped assisting around the house. Since we both started working, we've always divided household tasks evenly. I've always cooked and packed our lunches every day. Carla handled the dishes, loading and unloading the dishwasher, and was in charge of the washing, while I did all of the folding and grass mowing. This system of shared responsibility has always been effective for us. But Carla abruptly ceased holding up her half of the bargain. She began to moan about how she felt oppressed by having to perform housekeeping, claiming that none of her friends appeared to have to work both at their jobs and from home. We had always had a mutual understanding, an equal give and take that allowed us both to concentrate on our careers while keeping our home in order. Her sudden irritability seemed utterly out of character. When she voiced these objections, I attempted to comprehend her point of view, but I couldn't ignore the facts. I pointed out that if she was referring to her neighborhood acquaintances, most of them were stay-at-home spouses who spent their entire day running their homes. I said that if she was feeling burdened by both work and housework, we should consider her leaving her job to run the household full-time, and I would gladly take on the position of sole earner. However, if she did not want to leave her job, she needed to understand that we both had to share home responsibilities. After all, I had never complained about the housework I did, so why was she bringing it up? Carla insisted that she no longer wanted to do housekeeping, claiming that her obligations at work were already too taxing, and she didn't want to come home and work on top of that. She told me I needed to step up and take care of things around the house, at least until she felt more prepared. Since then, I've been performing all of the household responsibilities by myself, with no assistance. I take care of the cooking, cleaning, and laundry to ensure that everything works properly. I hoped that she would finally recognize and appreciate my efforts. But, sadly, my work has gone unnoticed. So, after all of my efforts, imagine my surprise when I realized that 2 months ago, my wife was going around the neighborhood spreading false allegations about me. I learned from some of my male neighbors, whose wives are acquainted with Carla. These friends, who have known me for a long time, sounded concerned about what my wife had said. Carla had apparently been characterizing me as a domineering or poisonous husband, stating that I never allowed her to live calmly. When some of these wives inquired as to what I was doing to make her feel this way, Carla claimed that over time, she had realized that I was too closed-minded and had prevented her from having any enjoyment. As a result, she began to feel unfulfilled in our marriage. This, she claimed, was why she began engaging with other men. To help her reconnect with pieces of herself that she felt had become too suppressed since marrying me. She also told her friends that she had begun fantasizing about exploring her femininity with other men. At first, I clearly did not trust them. This did not sound like Carla at all. Carla, I knew, was always discreet about our relationship and avoided discussing personal topics, particularly with our friends. Also, why would she lie about me like this? I'd never stopped her from doing anything. For months, she had been doing anything she wanted as I stood silently by. She suddenly blamed me for being toxic and repressing her. I chose to face her directly, telling her what my friends had revealed to me. I asked her whether it was true that she had been talking about me this way. I wanted to hear her side of the story and understand why she felt compelled to share those details with others. To my surprise, Carla did not dispute any of it. She quietly revealed that she had communicated her sentiments with those people, explaining that she was dissatisfied and unsure about our relationship, so she vented her anger to others. I asked her what she meant exactly. Carla began to open up about her therapy sessions, revealing how her therapist had helped her recognize what she lacked in her life: enthusiasm. She informed me, in an unnaturally detached tone, that she now found me uninteresting and predictable, and that our marriage lacked passion. These words stung, especially since I had always imagined she was happy with the life we had created together. I reminded her of all the times she had expressed happiness, and how we had worked together to maintain our relationship balanced and fulfilling over the years. Instead of understanding where I was coming from, she accused me of stifling her by clinging to old memories and situations that she believed were obsolete. She argued that, while she had grown and kept up with the changes, I had remained the same, which was why we were so disconnected. My thoughts began to spin, so I asked her bluntly, "What do you want from our marriage?" She hesitated, evidently nervous, before adding that she and her therapist believed that an open marriage could help us restore our marriage. I was taken aback. I told her up front that I did not believe in open weddings. Carla then claimed that even if I didn't believe in them, she did. She stated that talking up about our relationship would restore the excitement she felt was missing, allowing her to rediscover herself while remaining married to me. She also emphasized that, in an open marriage, if I wasn't comfortable sleeping with strangers, that was fine, but she wanted the opportunity to do so without guilt. Her suggestion sent me reeling. I could scarcely understand what she was saying. I never expected that our marriage would reach a stage where she would seek satisfaction elsewhere. How could meeting new people while still married improve our relationship? How could her therapist propose something like this? I assumed my wife was seeing a therapist to improve herself, but in actuality, this so-called therapist was merely encouraging her to explore these crazy beliefs. I informed Carla that if she wanted a divorce, she didn't have to lie about being excited or needing anything new in her life. I argued that if she was so dissatisfied with me, she should just be honest instead of making up excuses to justify an open marriage. I told her that it was better for us to part ways than to stay married while meeting up with strangers. This was not how I imagined a marriage to be, and I couldn't stand by it. But, to my astonishment, Carla fought back, insisting she enjoyed being married to me. She highlighted how much she respected me as a dependable and trustworthy partner, and how I offered a stable basis that she valued. Yet, in the same breath, she said the spark between us had vanished. She insisted that we stay married and simply have fun with other people. She suggested that this new venture could help us and keep our marriage interesting. I informed my wife that I needed time to think about it because this was not a decision I could take lightly. But as I spent the following few days pondering on our relationship, I realized that an open marriage was not for me. And more crucially, neither was the person Carla had become. She had changed so much over time that I could no longer recognize her or feel close to her. She dressed differently. Her outfits had suddenly become more exposing and provocative. She was always hooked to her phone and engaged in chats with others. It was as if she had adopted a whole different lifestyle, one that no longer allowed for the principles we formerly shared. She seldom spoke to me anymore and had completely disregarded her job in maintaining our home. She treated me as a roommate at best, not a partner. I slowly realized that I did not want this version of my wife. I didn't want a companion who needed to see other people to feel satisfied. I had spent months trying to be patient, supportive, and give her the space she required, but the Carla I had fallen in love with had vanished, replaced by someone who appeared to consider our relationship as a convenience rather than a commitment. And it stung. But I understood it might be time to let go of our marriage. I had done everything I could, but it was clearly insufficient. After 2 weeks of careful consideration, I got down with Carla and informed her that I wanted a divorce. I explained all of the reasons I had given above and persuaded her not to challenge my decision. Carla, on the other hand, became enraged almost immediately. She accused me of being overly sensitive and felt that requesting a divorce was an unreasonable response. She couldn't understand why I wouldn't just give in and embrace the new lifestyle she was offering. I remained calm, emphasizing that this was not what I wanted and that she couldn't compel me to accept it. Each point I made seemed to make her angrier. Carla suddenly turned on me, accusing me of refusing to work on our marriage, alleging that I was the root of the problem. I wasn't surprised by her decision. She had always enjoyed gaslighting me and blaming me for everything without taking any responsibility herself. I tried to reason with her, but she refused to give in. Realizing we were going nowhere, I asked her to go. Since this was my house, I felt right in telling her to gather her belongings and go now that we were finished. Carla raged at me, saying I had no right to ask her to leave, and even threatened to ruin my life if I followed through with the divorce. Her wrath simply confirmed my choice, so I held firm, quietly advising her not to escalate the issue any further. In the end, she had no choice but to comply, but only after throwing a tantrum. She threw stuff around the home and even scratched my car in a fit of wrath before departing. Fortunately, I documented everything, photographic evidence of the damage and recordings of her outbursts, knowing that I would probably need it later on. This was simply a sad, terrible end to what had once been a really important relationship. Carla has been texting me insults about my manhood and spreading tales around town, accusing me of unfairly kicking her out and calling me a coward for failing to fight for our marriage. Update 1. Thank you everyone for your warm words. I'm not a fool. I now recognize that my wife may have had an affair, or several affairs, outside of our marriage. This is probably why she had the nerve to propose an open marriage to me. Clearly, she only wanted the benefits of being married to someone as established as me while putting no effort into our relationship. Why did this happen? I have no idea. Perhaps she never truly loved me, or she fell out of love over time. It doesn't really matter anymore. Carla continues to leave voicemails blaming me for everything. I'm tired of her continual allegations. Update 2. It has been 2 weeks since my last update. Carla had been wanting to meet for the past week, messaging and calling regularly, so I finally agreed to meet with her today. Part of me hoped she'd come around, that she'd be willing to discuss openly and even accept responsibility for everything that had happened between us. But as soon as we sat down, Carla went into a new story. She indicated that her therapist thought I was departing our marriage just because things had become difficult. According to this so-called therapist, I was the one who failed to fulfill my promise by refusing to adhere to Carla's requests. Then, as if that wasn't enough, Carla said she was willing to accept me back if I agreed to certain terms. I was taken aback. Take me back? Remember when I asked her for a divorce? To entertain myself, I inquired about her condition. Carla requested that I commit to an open marriage and allow her to leave her job so she could enjoy a stress-free life without having to worry about work. Hearing this made me laugh out loud. Initially, I assumed she was joking. How could she possibly be doubling down on such ridiculous expectations after everything that had occurred? Did she really expect me to be open to any of this after how she had treated me? Her total lack of self-awareness was astonishing. I told her right away that I would never agree to such foolish demands, because I was done with our marriage. I then stated that I had previously consulted with a lawyer and was in the process of filing for divorce. Her face became white with horror. Her tone changed immediately, from angry to imploring. She inquired whether I was really leaving her. I nodded. There was nothing left for me in our marriage. I was ultimately tired of trying to make things work with someone who seemed removed from reality and unwilling to compromise. Then Carla burst into tears. I was surprised to see her cry. This was the last thing I had expected. I gently urged her to calm down and explain why she was reacting in this way. Was she truly saddened over my decision? She should have anticipated this all along, right? Watching her cry made me question whether there was something more going on. I begged her to be honest with me. Was there something more behind her unusual conduct during the last few months? Carla finally opened up and revealed the truth. She added that approximately a year ago, she reconnected with an old high school acquaintance named Elle during their reunion. Elle was a self-proclaimed relationship expert on social media. Carla stated that she and Elle began spending more and more time together, rekindling their connection through long conversations and regular meetups. She acknowledged that Elle had begun to exert a big effect in her life. Over time, Carla disclosed that it was Elle who first noticed that she was unhappy in our marriage and began probing her about me and our relationship. Carla admitted that as she told Elle more about me and our life together, he frequently criticized our marriage, portraying it as oppressive and limiting. Elle continually reminded Carla of how exciting and adventurous she was in high school, when she had numerous boyfriends, and how she had always expected Carla to be the same way. Elle, on the other hand, thought Carla had gotten uninteresting. This caused Carla to resent me. She essentially blamed me for her change in conduct. She felt as if she had lost herself in the marriage, and rather than accepting responsibility for her own actions, she transferred her dissatisfaction onto me. Over time, her animosity grew, and she began to emotionally remove herself, certain that I was the reason she wasn't living the life she desired for herself. Elle gradually convinced Carla that the only way she could return to her old self was to let go of her inhibitions, be more open around others, and simply have fun. When Carla's business trip came around 7 months ago, Elle encouraged her to take advantage of the opportunity to let loose and flirt with her male coworkers, especially because she would be away from home and me. Carla then admitted to having made out with someone during her work trip but refused to tell me his name. She informed me that after returning from the vacation, she felt terrible shame but was too afraid to admit it. However, Elle was overjoyed for her and encouraged her to branch out beyond our marriage. Carla stated that going out to clubs and getting attention from men made her feel recognized and validated. It excited her, and she began to pursue that high. She knew she was doing something bad all along, but she couldn't stop herself. So, when I finally suggested counseling, she was worried she'd give in and tell me the truth, forcing me to leave her. Instead, she sought therapy as a cover-up. These so-called treatment sessions were not actually therapy at all. They were just meetings with Elle to gossip and vent. Carla said that she trusted Elle fully because they had known each other for years and she believed Elle knew her better than anyone else. Elle's influence grew so strong that Carla began to internalize what her friend told her, that she deserved freedom and excitement, regardless of the consequences. When I approached her and explained my worries, Elle would convince Carla that I was controlling or toxic, that I was preventing her from expressing her true self. In fact, it was because of Elle that Carla had begged for an open marriage, expecting me to give in. But, to her amazement, I hadn't. Rather, I had kicked her out. Inside, Carla informed me that she had wanted to tell me the truth after that, but Elle had persuaded her to keep control of the situation, to keep me on edge and force me to chase her instead. Elle had forcefully persuaded Carla not to apologize at this lunch, suggesting that she should demand what she wanted from me. However, Elle's advice backfired, and instead of breaking, I appeared more determined than ever to pursue a divorce. That's why Carla eventually revealed the truth. Carla urged me to not leave her. She admitted that she had most likely lost her mind temporarily, that Elle's influence had muddled her judgment. She said that because her buddy was a relationship expert, she believed her counsel. However, it was now evident that none of it had helped, it had just exacerbated the situation. Carla stated that now that she had finally come clean, she was ready to pursue legitimate therapy and, if I was willing, attend marriage counseling together. I could tell Carla was eager for one last shot to recreate what we had, promising to do everything it needed to make up. However, I was unwilling to give her another chance. Clearly, Elle had influenced my wife's decision, but she wasn't the only issue here. Carla had also been involved in all of this. She had made her own decisions, deliberately and knowingly. For months, she could have mended our connection by having an honest discussion about her feelings as an adult. Instead, she chose to keep everything bottled up and succumb to Elle's destructive advice. She had gaslighted me, twisted me, and rejected my emotions, all while claiming everything was fine. Also, she had cheated on me. And now, when it was too late, she had only spoken the truth out of desperation. Now to the next story 9. My husband's ex and male tried to humiliate me for years until their almost anniversary stunt backfired and he finally cut them off for good. For reference, I, 28F, and my husband Shaw, 28M, have been married for 2 years. Shaw and I dated for 2 years before, but we'd known each other since high school. We didn't start dating for a few years after graduation. I met him at a restaurant unexpectedly, exchanged numbers, went on a few dates, and that's how we ended ourselves here, nearly 4 years later. Shaw was dating Diane, another high school girl, before I met her. She was a grade below us and had known Shaw since middle school. He and I were not really close, but we had a lot of shared acquaintances back in school, so I saw a lot of him and Diane together. After we graduated from high school, I lost touch with him because he moved to college in a distant state and we didn't see much of one another. When we finally met at the restaurant some years later, I asked him about Diane. He told me that they had split up 1.5 years ago. She was the one who dumped him because she wanted different things in life and needed a break to travel the world. But she promised to come back to him someday. Which simply meant she wanted to be alone for a time, date other men without guilt, and retain Shaw as a backup plan. So, following the breakup, he remained friends with her but reduced contact. By the time we met, he'd nearly completely moved on from Diane. I had also begun to see him in a new light. He had matured much since our previous meeting in high school. Shaw and I reconnected 4 years ago and soon became friends. We still have the same laid-back relationship. He claims that is something he never had with Diane. She was continually trying to get him to chase after her because she thought it made her more beautiful. She flirted with other guys, went out with her friends without speaking to him for days, and never asked Shaw how he felt about anything. He stayed with her because he was young and stupid, and he felt obligated to make the relationship work because they had been together for so long. Another factor was that his mother, Sharon, 49F, was a major fan of Diane. Diane had met my mother-in-law numerous times while they were together. Sharon praised Diane and pretended to be someone else whenever Diane visited. According to Shaw, Diane did the same thing for Sharon, showering her with accolades and acting like a completely different person to impress her. They would chat about other people, particularly Shaw's female acquaintances, whom he despised, and sometimes even about him. Shaw's aunts and cousins. Diane is also conventionally attractive, which makes Sharon appreciate her even more. I'm not sure why that exists, but it does. Shaw told me that Sharon continued to invite Diane to family occasions and holiday dinners after their breakup. He tried talking to his mother about it, urging her not to invite Diane, but Sharon refused. She stated that she really liked her and that even though they had split up, she and Diane remained friends, so she saw nothing wrong with inviting her around. They spoke almost every other week and were really good friends. So this persisted even after I began dating Shaw and he introduced me to his family. I felt strange about it at first, and still do. But there was a reason I had tolerated it for so long. Shaw initially brought me home to meet his family for Christmas 4 years ago. We had been dating for about 8 months. Diane was also present, and she treated me horribly the entire time. She noticed my appearance, height, clothes, makeup, you name it. She was skilled enough to make everything sound funny, as if she was joking, but Shaw knew exactly what she was doing and stood up for me. Sharon, on the other hand, quickly shut it down and asked me if I had a problem with Diane's jokes, putting me in the position. I knew that if I indicated I wasn't good with it, they'd make it appear as if I was insecure or jealous, putting me down even further. So I resolved to present a strong front and say, I don't care. It was petty of me, but the moment I said it, I saw their expressions. They seemed surprised, and annoyed. That's when I realized I'd done the correct thing. When Shaw and I came home, He apologized to me for Sharon and Diane's behavior. He promised me he'd make sure his mother stopped inviting Diane to family functions. But I was the one who warned him not to do that. I knew the type of woman they were, and I didn't want to lose to them, if you get my drift. I didn't want them to believe they were intimidating me or making me feel insecure. Because they had not. And I felt compelled to prove it. I explained this to Shaw, and although he was astonished by my approach, he stopped interfering after that day. Since then, Diane has attended every single family function Sharon has thrown. Every time they act the same way with me. Snide remarks. Backhanded compliments. Constant attempts to bring up Diane's past with Shaw, even when it is entirely unrelated, in order to make things difficult for me. I've confronted everything with a brave face, and I try to remain as unmoved as possible. Sharon has even stated multiple times that Diane was her ideal daughter-in-law and would have made a better bride for Shaw. Indirectly, of course. It was bothersome, but I tried to seem unconcerned. Because as long as Shaw was by my side, I didn't mind what others said. Sharon and Diane could talk for hours on end, and it wouldn't matter to me. That's how I've handled things for the past 4 years. And I intended to maintain the same mindset for the next 4. I was not going to be the first one to snap, that was for sure. Now let's get into what actually happened, the incident that brought me here. Sharon became 49 years old 3 days ago. Every year, she throws a big celebration for her family and friends. This year, Shaw did not want to attend. Instead, he wanted to attend his co-worker's engagement celebration, which happened to fall on the same day. And he had good reasons. His co-worker was only getting engaged once, and they were really close. However, Sharon refused to accept it. She made him pledge to attend her birthday party instead. And after days of pressure, she wore him out. So we decided to go. Diane was invited to the function, just like any other. And she dressed to the nines. For some reason, Sharon was also overdressed. But it was her birthday, so I let that one go. Shaw and I had agreed to leave after Sharon cut the cake and attend the engagement celebration. At around 5:30 p.m., my father-in-law brought out the cakes, and to our astonishment, there were 2. One of them stated, "Happy almost anniversary." Shaw and I were puzzled. We had no idea what the other cake meant, and neither did anyone else. We waited for the birthday girl to explain. Instead, Diane took over. To our surprise, she took Shaw's arm and dragged him to stand close to her. We were too surprised to respond because he had suddenly been forced into the spotlight, and everyone was staring at him. Then Diane began chatting. She began by telling that almost 10 years ago, on Sharon's birthday, Shaw had gotten down on one knee and handed her a promise ring. They were both 18 years old at the time, set to go to various colleges. 10 years later, she still wore the same ring. To prove that, she proudly raised her hand in front of everyone. Then she wrapped Shaw in an awkward hug, which he did not respond to. Sharon encouraged them, smiling as she explained that she was ready to let them steal her thunder this time so they could enjoy what may have been. The whole situation was so absurd that Shaw and I stood there with our mouths agape, just like the rest of the guests. For several minutes, no one spoke. Because what could you possibly say in response to something this insane? But Diane kept going. She joked about Shaw being her almost husband, and Sharon being her almost mother-in-law, thus today was their almost anniversary. As if we didn't get the joke. Then Sharon sliced the so-called anniversary cake. She started by feeding Diane a slice. Then she tried feeding it to Shaw. That's when Shaw appeared to snap back to reality. He backed away from his mother when she brought the cake close to his mouth. Sharon was astonished and questioned him, "What's wrong?" That's when all hell broke loose. Shaw exploded. He began shouting at Sharon and Diane, calling them out for what they had just done. Years of pent-up rage eventually spilled out, right there, in the thick of the celebration. He ripped into them, calling them shallow, ignorant, and so self-centered that they had become entirely insane. He admitted that he felt humiliated to have ever been engaged with Diane. He was even more mortified that he was biologically connected to Sharon. Because they were the trashiest women he'd ever met. I have to admit that his reaction surprised me. Shaw is normally a pretty calm guy. He rarely yells or gets furious with others. It takes a lot to drive him to the brink. But Sharon and Diane had finally finished it. With each other's assistance, of course. After shouting at them, Shaw stormed out of the party, followed by me. Instead, we took a taxi directly to his co-worker's place. I tried to talk to him in the cab, but he was clearly agitated. He said he didn't want to talk about his mother or his ex at that time. So I dropped it. When we arrived at the engagement party, his attitude gradually improved as he greeted his friends and coworkers. I was happy to see he was doing well. When we returned home, Shah was in a much better mood. So I decided to bring up what happened at Sharon's party again, hoping that he would want to talk about it now. But he didn't. Instead, I received an earful about how some of this was also my fault. When I recalled the event, he admitted that Sharon and Diane had attempted to embarrass me with that ludicrous cake. But I wasn't completely innocent. He reminded me that for years, I had forced him to remain silent and let Sharon and Diane do whatever they wanted. Because I felt I needed to demonstrate that I didn't care. I had made it all about myself. My urge to show others how unconcerned I was. But in doing so, I entirely forgot that Shah was equally implicated in this mess as I was. And it was getting on his nerves. While Sharon, Diane, and I were competing in mind games, Shah was hurting. Nobody bothered to check on him or ask how he felt about anything. He did not anticipate his mother or ex to show him any consideration. But he expected it of me. And in that moment, he told me something that struck me hard. I'd let him down by prioritizing my own feelings over his in the scenario. That night, I protested with him, telling him that he was being far too harsh and cruel to me. But now that I've had time to think about it, I believe he was correct. I had pushed my husband to remain silent for years while his mother welcomed his ex to family gatherings only to bring me down. Okay, I apologized to Shah this evening. I read the comments, did some reflection, and even discussed it with a few of my friends. I concluded that I was in the wrong here, and that what he said that day was accurate. I had been putting my feelings before of his, and I was so busy behaving as if Diane and Sharon's behavior didn't disturb me that I didn't even consider the possibility that it did bother Shah. For his sake, I should have allowed him terminate this if he wanted to. I forced him to ignore his own feelings for years so that I could win a sick mind game with individuals I didn't even like. And in doing so, I risked the one connection that was most important to me. I had made a serious mistake and realized I needed to make amends. Shah had been giving me the cold shoulder since the party, and I had tried to pretend it didn't bother me. It's something I've always done, and it's been a problem for a long time. My natural reaction is to pretend that things don't upset me, even when they do. I want to be viewed as unconcerned and unaffected by anything, so I act like it and suppress my emotions. I now recognize that this is a really harmful coping method. I absolutely need to work on this if I want my marriage to work. I skipped work today and decided to get him dinner at his favorite restaurant, as well as a chocolate cake with the words, "I'm sorry," written on it. I returned home, set everything up, and tried to make it as romantic as possible, because I know he likes sappy rom-com style apologies. Also, I was really sorry for what I had put him through, even if it was inadvertent. He arrived home from work in the evening and was surprised to see what I had planned for him. He forgave me within 15 minutes of his arrival. We had a tearful reconciliation, and I ended up crying because I was afraid I'd lose him over it. When he wasn't speaking to me, I felt completely adrift. We spoke it out, and everything is well between us now. Since I admitted my mistake, I revealed to him my constant desire to be viewed as calm and laid back, someone nonchalant for no other reason than it seems cool, and because I don't want to be vulnerable in front of others. That is the underlying explanation for this entire catastrophe. He recognized and respected the fact that I admitted it and stated that I needed to work on it rather than shoving it down and suppressing my emotions. He also apologized for being nasty to me, which I don't believe he needed to do. He did it because he is a good man and loves me, which makes me feel like I have won in life. After supper, we finally discussed what had transpired to Diane and Sharon. I hadn't heard from either of them since the party, and my battle with Shah had pushed the whole issue out of my mind. Sharon, on the other hand, had been continually texting Shah, attempting to persuade him to apologize to Diane, who was supposedly distraught and stricken with grief as a result of Shah's treatment of her. I had to work pretty hard not to roll my eyes when I read the messages Sharon sent. She was clearly attempting to guilt-trip him into apologizing to the woman. Sharon pretended that the cake and the entire almost anniversary farce were nothing more than a joke. There was nothing deeper behind it. But I called BS on it. This was a married man they were pulling this scam on. Surely, they had the intelligence to recognize how improper and insulting this was towards me. They did it on purpose, since they wanted to humiliate me during the party. So they couldn't simply dismiss it by saying, "It was just a joke," and pretend Shah had overreacted. The hubris of them to claim that Shah and I had gone too far or disrespected them by leaving the party was ridiculous. Shah had previously been ignoring her communications, but when I got those messages today, we finally agreed to stop communicating with her. We'd had enough of her crap. And we didn't want any part of it anymore. 3 days ago, Shah and I blocked Sharon from all of our social media accounts. Shah also told his father that he didn't want to speak with his mother anymore. His father appreciated his decision, because he knew Shah's emotions. But he also refused to interfere. He loves his wife and knows he can't leave her, so he's remaining completely out of it, as he has for the past 5 years. I don't agree with my father-in-law's attitude, but I can't do anything about it. Everything had been running perfectly for the preceding 2 days. But then, today, Shaw contacted me out of the blue and said he needed to run to the hospital. Apparently, his mother had fallen from the top of the steps and fractured her leg. Shaw's maternal uncle had informed him, and he fled immediately upon hearing the news. We both arrived at the hospital at roughly the same time. But before we could enter, Sharon stopped us in our tracks, and she was perfectly well. She and Diane had surprised us in the hospital's parking lot. Then they nonchalantly informed us that this was the only way to grab Shaw's attention, because he had blocked them everywhere. They didn't expect me to show up with him. Instead of acknowledging me, they ignored me and began talking to Shaw as if they had done nothing wrong. Diane attempted to explain that everything she did at the party was a prank and that she never meant to insult him. Sharon backed her up. Shaw allowed them to converse for a bit. And then, much to their surprise, he told his mother and XTF off. Then he went away with me once more. Sharon started shouting at us as we got into our different cars. But we didn't stay around to hear what she had to say. I'm sure she was cursing at us, but it didn't matter. She lied to get to meet Shaw again. And I couldn't think of anything more manipulative than that. Shaw returned home because he was too stressed. I, on the other hand, needed to return to work. While at work, I received a call from an unknown number. It turned out to be Sharon. She screamed at me for 15 seconds before I finally disconnected the call. I'd merely been taken off guard while working. Else, I wouldn't have responded. All I heard were handpicked swear words spoken at maximum volume. I had no idea why she was furious at me. I had nothing to do with Shaw's behavior. She had pushed her own son to that point, not me. Anyway, I blocked her and attempted to go on with my day. When I came back home at 6 p.m., I finally got to speak with Shaw. He told me that he had also blocked the rest of his mother's relatives, including his uncle, because it was obvious that they would go to any length to persuade him to forgive Sharon and speak with her. That's all we can do right now since they're not threatening us in any manner, and they're not stalking us on a regular basis, so a restraining order is not an option. Shaw also told his father about what happened today, but he still refuses to intervene. It's his choice, and Shaw adores his father, so I won't say anything right now. But, personally, I don't think my father-in-law's behavior is a wonderful example of being a good father. The least he could do was speak to his wife and advocate for his son. But he won't even do it. Shaw adores his father, but the man has never stood up for him when it comes to Sharon. I've only kept my mouth shut out of respect for their relationship. Otherwise, I'd have a lot to say about how incredibly selfish his entire family is. They never think about anyone other than themselves. I will never understand how a man like Shaw could come from such a family. Hello everyone, it's been a week since I last updated. Yesterday, Shaw and I decided to file a restraining order against Sharon and Diane because of something they did to me. Or, more precisely, attempted to do. 3 days ago, on Thursday, I was returning from work. On Thursdays, I normally go to a coffee shop near my office and purchase myself a frappuccino as a treat. Last Thursday, I was planning to do the same. But as soon as I walked into the shop, Diane and Sharon rose from their chairs, where they had been waiting for me, and rushed straight at me with their coffees. Before I could even respond, they both flung their drinks in my face. Then Diane took some whipped cream from her cup and put it into my hair. I was stunned. I just froze on the spot as everyone laughed. The baristas ran over to assist me clean up. They did their best to remove the muck off of me, so a big thanks to them for basically quitting their work to assist me. Even the other customers were patient and kind. When I finally got the most of it off, my clothing were sticky and unpleasant, and my hair was horrible, but at least I was cleaner. Some of the other patrons inquired about me, and one even asked if I wanted to contact the cops. So I did. I reported Diane and Sharon and filed charges against them. However, they just received a fine, a slap on the wrist, because this was a misdemeanor and they had not physically hurt me. Unless you consider my clothes, which I can't wear to work again due to fading brown coffee stains on the front. Nonetheless, we filed charges, and the incident is now on their record, which will strengthen our case. Shaw wanted to make this public, so he posted about it on social media so that more people would be aware and avoid Diane and his mother. But he changed his mind when he saw I just wanted to move on from this without any further complications. Honestly, that encounter shook me more than I expected. It may seem ridiculous, but it actually made me think. If things had escalated, it might have been far worse than them throwing coffee in my face. They could have really injured me if they wanted to. They were familiar with my routine thanks to my social media presence. They had my address. This could have gone extremely wrong. Shaw and I had been considering moving since we had a good financial year. But with what occurred, we will definitely be going. We had also been thinking about having children and we're going to start trying soon. But my in-laws will never meet my children. We've also formally cut off my father-in-law, who refused to intervene even after the coffee incident. Shaw got into a heated argument with him and eventually cut him off. And honestly, I am relieved. I'll never have to see or hear from these folks again. Now to the next story 10. My brother mocked my act of kindness. Now he is in prison, his fortune is gone, and karma served every receipt he thought he could dodge. I never imagined that my brother's true nature would be revealed through a casual act of compassion, but here we are. I am still in the process of analyzing the events that transpired last Friday. Context: I have consistently been the black sheep of the family due to my decision to establish my own path rather than participating in the family enterprise. Noah, my brother, succeeded our father, and he ensures that no one forgets it. However, I have accomplished quite a bit for myself. I am typically responsible for the cost of our family outings. Friday was intended to be a day of festivity. Noah had been boasting about a significant transaction that he had successfully completed, so I proposed that we all dine at this upscale restaurant in the heart of downtown. Noah, his wife, Isabella, and their daughter Hazel were present, as was my mother Cora. Hazel, who is 8 years old, is likely the sole authentic individual in our family, with the exception of myself. The evening began in a typical manner. Noah's typical self-importance dominated the conversation, and Isabella nodded in agreement as if he were divulging the secrets of the universe. Over the years, I have developed the ability to disregard it, instead concentrating on Hazel's narratives regarding her academic pursuits and her most recent artistic endeavor. Things began to change when our food arrived. I observed an elderly man seated on a bench outside the restaurant through the window. He was attempting to maintain his warmth in the evening chill, and he was carrying a small cart that appeared to contain all of his possessions. I have been privileged enough to be in a position where I can assist others, so I discreetly requested that our server include an additional meal in our order, their soup of the day and a sandwich, and have it packed for us to take with us. The exchange was not observed by any individual. Noah chuckled. "Are you once again assuming the role of the savior, little brother?" I chose to disregard him and proceeded with my discussion with Hazel regarding her science assignment. However, Noah was unable to relinquish it. "You know," he stated, loud enough for tables in the vicinity to hear, "it's funny how you're always trying to prove you're better than everyone else with these charitable acts. Is it because you're trying to forget when we were kids and Dad had to bail out your failed ventures?" I maintained my attention on Hazel, but she had become silent, observing the adults with that perceptive expression that children exhibit when they perceive that something is amiss. Isabella was already chuckling in anticipation of Noah's subsequent statement. The server returned with the packaged meal, and I excused myself to exit the establishment. I could hear Noah's voice echoing through the restaurant's open window as I approached the elderly man to offer him the food. "Even homeless people have more worth than you," he responded. "At least they're honest about who they are. You're just pretending you're not the same failure you've always been." The elderly man had just expressed his gratitude to me when the table erupted in hilarity. A chorus that felt as though it was drilling into my cranium was formed by my mother's nervous titter, Isabella's shrill cackle, and Noah's booming laugh. Hazel was the sole individual who maintained her silence, her eyes wide with concern and her face plastered against the window. I returned to the interior, sat down, and consumed my supper in silence. Noah continued his performance by interjecting with jokes about my charity cases, and my attempt to buy a personality. Each comment elicited the anticipated laughter. I observed Hazel pushing her food around her dish, her previous enthusiasm having been completely deflated. I withdrew my card without speaking when the check arrived. When I stood up, Noah was in the midst of another narrative regarding his business acumen. Isabella expressed her gratitude for the dinner, without even raising her head from her phone. I observed each of them, my mother, who was avoiding eye contact, Noah and Isabella, who were absorbed in their own world, and Hazel, who abruptly rose to offer me an embrace. I embraced her for a brief period of time before placing my card on the table. "The bill's paid. I need to go." That was the extent of my remarks prior to my departure. Noah was likely to erupt into another commentary regarding my dramatic exits, as I observed him rolling his eyes through the window. They are unaware that I utilize the weekend to conduct inquiries and make phone calls regarding matters that I have neglected for an excessive amount of time. Perhaps it is time to examine the extent to which my brother has been fulfilling the responsibilities of which he is so proud. I have provided more assistance to the family business than they are aware. The elderly individual was still present when I departed. He had meticulously preserved half of his sandwich by enveloping it in the paper napkin for later. He expressed his gratitude once more with a level of dignity that Noah would have been unable to comprehend. I presented him with my business card and advised him to visit my office if he required any assistance. Noah believes that one's worth is determined by the extent to which they can extract from others. He is on the brink of discovering his error. Initially, I would like to extend my gratitude to all of you for your encouraging feedback on my most recent post. Numerous events have transpired, necessitating that I disclose my findings. The situation is more severe than I had anticipated. The past 2 weeks have been intriguing. My phone has been inundated with messages from family members, each of which is more urgent than the previous one. I have not replied to any of them, with the exception of Hazel's texts regarding her art endeavors. Her suffering should not be a consequence of the adult drama. The truly intriguing aspect of the situation commenced on the previous Tuesday, when I received an email from Eliza, an acquaintance of my father who is responsible for certain administrative tasks related to the family business. The subject line was straightforward. It is imperative that we engage in conversation. I was left feeling frigid after the 2-hour video call that ensued. It transpired that my brother Noah's significant transactions were not quite as substantial as he had previously asserted. Eliza had initially observed minor discrepancies in the accounts, which gradually became more apparent. She attempted to discuss the matter with my mother. However, Cora dismissed it with her customary Noah knows what he's doing attitude. I discreetly perused the records that Eliza forwarded to me over the course of the subsequent few days. Noah had been systematically siphoning money from the company for years, and the pattern was evident. Additionally, it is not limited to negligible quantities. We are discussing millions of dollars in consulting fees to shell companies that appear to be connected to personal accounts. The irony. Some of those accounts were funded by my personal investments in the family business. Guess to whom Noah turned whenever he required a capital injection to finance his purported expansion strategies. Additionally, I had consistently rendered assistance, under the impression that I was contributing to our father's legacy. Isabella contacted me yesterday. I am not expressing regret, but I am inquiring as to whether I will be present at the board meeting next week. Her voice was characterized by the artificial tenderness she employs when she desires something. I allowed it to be transferred to voicemail. However, her message was quite candid. Noah says it's just a formality, but he really needs you there to sign some papers. Family has to stick together, right? Exactly. Family. She is unaware that I have already communicated with the board members. It has been revealed that Noah has been providing the board with various versions of the company's status for months, each of which has been meticulously constructed to conceal his mismanagement. Nevertheless, numerical data is indisputable. These figures also reflect a pattern of systematic fraud and larceny. The most alarming discovery was made when reviewing the timestamps of specific transactions. Do you recall the elderly individual who was standing outside the restaurant? Noah had transferred a substantial sum to an offshore account on the same day that I purchased him dinner. This sum was precisely the amount required to cover the payroll of our father's longest-serving employees. He has been mocking others for demonstrating fundamental human decency while simultaneously playing with people's livelihoods. Cora transmitted a text message this morning. Please, Benjamin, whatever you're doing, think about your brother's family. Think about Hazel. I am contemplating Hazel. I am contemplating the manner in which her father has been robbing her future while simultaneously teaching her that cruelty is permissible, as long as it is done with a sense of humor. Tomorrow is the date of the board meeting. Noah is unaware that I have already submitted a comprehensive audit report. He is unaware that Eliza has been meticulously chronicling every detail for several months. He is unaware that his idyllic existence, which is characterized by privilege and ridicule, is on the brink of dissolution. Noah sent me a text message, which caused my phone to vibrate once more. Hey, little brother? We need you at the office tomorrow. Time to step up and be part of the family business finally. What do you say? What should I say? Nothing? Not yet. However, I have organized 3 folders of documents, one for the board, one for the authorities. Additionally, one is designated for our mother, who will be compelled to confront the transformation of her golden child. In the remarks of my most recent post, a few of you inquired as to why I did not confront Noah at the restaurant. In reality, I have been resisting him throughout my life, albeit not in the manner that he perceived. He will comprehend the precise nature of the individual he has been disparaging for the past decade tomorrow. The elderly fellow from the restaurant? Last week, he visited my office. Years ago, it transpired that he was employed by my father. The final few pieces of the puzzle were filled in by the anecdotes he shared about Noah's early days in the company. I have scheduled a vehicle to transport Hazel to her preferred art class tomorrow, following her dismissal from school. She should not be compelled to observe the impending events. At times, safeguarding family members necessitates safeguarding them from other family members. The meeting is scheduled for 9 a.m. Tomorrow I will provide you with an update on the progress. But one thing is certain, Noah is about to discover that karma does not always act in a positive manner. Update 2, the board meeting has concluded. I am currently seated in my vehicle, attempting to comprehend the events of the past 4 hours. A few of you requested an immediate update, so I am providing it. At 8:30 a.m., I arrived ahead of schedule. There was only Eliza in the conference room, and she was in the process of assembling the projector. She gave me a slight nod. Everything was prepared. I positioned my 3 containers on the table and awaited instruction. At 8:55 a.m., Noah entered the room, with Isabella following in his footsteps as she had done in the past. When he recognized me, he actually smiled. That same smug smirk that he had worn at the restaurant. Finally decided to join the family business, little brother? I refrained from responding. I observed as the board members entered, followed by our mother. Cora appeared anxious, her gaze alternating between Noah and me. She was aware that something was amiss. However, she was unaware of the impending events. Noah initiated the meeting with his customary enthusiasm, discussing future expansions and growth projections. I permitted him to continue for precisely 15 minutes. Allow him to further excavate that pit. I then proceeded to access the initial folder. We should review these transactions from the past 3 years before we discuss expansion plans, I stated, passing copies to each board member. Noah's expression remained unchanged. However, his left eye twitched, a symptom that has been present in him since infancy. Isabella likely reached for her phone to initiate damage control. I had already blocked the room's signal. One board member perused the pages and inquired, "Benjamin, what is the subject of this?" I responded, "It pertains to accountability." I then turned to Noah. "Would you like to explain the consulting fees to Maxwell Holdings, or should I?" His visage was devoid of color. Maxwell Holdings, his initial shell company. Named after his college companion. Poorly executed. Isabella intervened. "This is absurd. Noah has grown this company tenfold. You're just jealous because of what?" I inquired. "Because I chose my own path while your husband was stealing from employee pension funds." That captivated the attention of all individuals. Cora attempted to communicate, but I had already initiated the second folder. 3 years of systematic theft, I continued. Shell companies, fake consultancy fees, inflated contracts. But the pension fund, Noah, that's what made this criminal. "You are incapable of comprehending," Noah exclaimed, his voice quivering. "The market was volatile. I needed to cover some temporary shortfalls." "Temporary?" I extracted the bank statements. "Is that why you bought the yacht last month? To cover shortfalls?" Isabella's unwavering composure was compromised. "What yacht?" It transpired that Noah had neglected to inform his wife of his minor acquisitions. The vacation residence in the Bahamas. The offshore accounts. The debts associated with wagering. The subsequent 2 hours were characterized by a flurry of denials, accusations, and revelations. Noah employed every conceivable method. Deflection. Emotional manipulation. Even endeavoring to pin certain transactions to Eliza. However, I had documentation for each and every item. Each transfer. Each and every fraudulent contract, everything that is false. He ultimately exclaimed, "I fulfilled my obligations." Dad would have understood. He knew business isn't about playing nice. That was the moment when Cora finally discovered her voice. "Your father," she said with quietness, "fired his own brother for taking a single unauthorized commission. He would be ashamed." Noah chuckled. It was the same cruel chuckle from the restaurant. "Ashamed?" He directed his attention toward me. He'd be ashamed of him, the disappointment of abandoning the family business to play humanitarian. At least I stayed. At least I tried to keep his legacy alive. I opened the third folder and inquired, "By stealing from it?" "The one containing the police reports." The room fell silent. Noah's complexion underwent an intriguing gray hue. "You would not?" he murmured. "Remember what you said about homeless people having more worth than me," I recited. "At least they're honest about who they are." Noah's immediate removal was approved by the board. I had already completed the requisite paperwork as the dominant shareholder, a fact that he never bothered to verify. Isabella withdrew from the voting process midway through. Her flawless mask, entirely obliterated. Silent weeping streamed down Cora's face as she remained until the conclusion. She caressed my arm after the event concluded. Benjamin, I don't. Just make sure Hazel is okay. Noah attempted one final attempt as I was departing. You can't do this to me, I'm your brother. I retreated. No, Noah. What you are is a thief who happened to be born to the same parents as me. And now, you're unemployed. I hear the restaurant down the street is hiring. Try not to mock their charitable customers. The evidence is currently being reviewed by the police. Tomorrow, the board will convene to deliberate on restructuring. I have recently received a text message from Isabella's attorney. However, Hazel's art teacher conveyed the most critical message. She had the best time in class today. Won first prize for her painting. The subject? A man is seen dividing his sandwich. Occasionally, karma operates in a manner that is enigmatic. Occasionally, it functions precisely as intended. I will provide another update once all matters have been resolved. Right now, I must convene with the trustees of the pension fund. In contrast to certain individuals, I am a proponent of repaying my debts. Summing up, I have not provided an update in over a month, and I have committed to disclosing the outcome. Revenge, as the saying goes, is a dish that is best enjoyed chilled. I received mine with an accompanying accompaniment of complete destruction. We should commence with Noah. Do you recall how he consistently boasted about his business acumen? The authorities did not find it to be as remarkable as they had anticipated. Last week, they conducted an invasion of his residence. It transpired that my evidence was merely the top of the iceberg. Records of money laundering dating back 5 years were discovered. The most delightful aspect? It is likely that he believed himself to be too intelligent to be discovered, as he had taken meticulous notes of everything. 2 days subsequent to the board meeting, Isabella submitted a divorce petition. Not out of moral outrage, mind you. However, I ensured that she was informed about Noah's fiancée in the Bahamas. The individual for whom he acquired a residence using company funds. The same residence that Isabella believed was an investment property. Her attorney reached out to me in order to obtain evidence for the divorce proceedings. Everything was supplied by me. Without cost. The expression on Noah's face when he realized that his wife's counsel was aware of every detail of his financial crimes. Invaluable. However, I was not yet finished. Do you recall the elderly gentleman from the restaurant? He was not a typical former employee. He was the original associate of my father, and he was instrumental in the establishment of the company. Years ago, Noah had coerced him into early retirement by fabricating performance evaluations. His pension has been reinstated with retroactive pay, and he has been appointed to the board. What was his initial action? Voting to authorize a comprehensive audit of all decisions made by Noah over the past decade. The local news was impacted by the pension fund scandal. Noah's image was prominently featured on the front page as he was led from his residence. Who are his acquaintances in the upper level of society? They disappeared. It is remarkable how rapidly individuals distance themselves when the facade collapses. Cora attempted to mediate the situation by imploring me to withdraw the charges. She begged, "He is still your brother." I presented her with the surveillance footage that captured Noah ridiculing elderly employees as he reduced their retirement benefits. After that, she discontinued her defense of him. Company, I have assumed responsibility. However, it was not in the manner that Noah had encouraged me to. I have transformed it into a corporation that is owned by its employees. Equity is now granted to all employees who have served for an extended period. The expression on their features when they discovered that they would be shareholders, rather than mere employees. That is the embodiment of authentic business leadership. Isabella's social circle has collapsed. It has been discovered that individuals are reluctant to associate with individuals who were aware of pension fraud and chose to remain silent. Last week, her membership in the country club was terminated. It appears that they have established standards. Who knew? Noah's final attempt. Noah attempted to reach out to me via his attorney, offering to mend things if I dropped the charges. I forwarded the message to the prosecutors as evidence of attempted witness tampering. He is currently facing a sentence of 15 years, not 5. However, the genuine karma arrived yesterday. Noah believed himself to be astute by concealing funds in cryptocurrency accounts. He was unaware that I had been monitoring those accounts since the very beginning. He was unable to retrieve them from his parents' residence, where he had been residing since the divorce, as they were empty. Every penny had been transferred to a trust fund for Hazel. Regarding Hazel, she is currently residing with Isabella's sister. I have arranged for her to attend the most prestigious art school in the metropolis. Her college education will be funded by the trust fund. Noah is incapable of handling any of it. His daughter will be afforded opportunities that he is unable to control or seize. The elderly individual who initiated this entire situation? He is flourishing. I have established a foundation in his honor to provide assistance to retired employees. Who was the initial recipient? Noah's former aide, whom he terminated for excessively inquiring about the accounting. Yesterday, I received a letter from Noah's penitentiary. He stated that he has finally comprehended the concept of genuine worth. I had it framed and posted it in the boardroom, adjacent to the new company mission statement. Integrity is not negotiable. Some of you inquired as to whether I harbor any remorse for the devastation I caused to my brother's life. No, I do not. He had the opportunity to prioritize compassion over cruelty and integrity over greed for an extended period of time. He consistently selected the incorrect option. Last night, I returned to that restaurant. Seated at the same table. However, this time, I was not accompanied by my family. I was present with the elderly man, who is now a member of the board, and we deliberated on the organization's new charitable foundation. I observed an individual who appeared to be Noah's erstwhile golf partner bussing tables as we departed. Karma is a process that requires time to unfold. However, receipts are included when it arrives. This will serve as my concluding update. The organization is flourishing. Hazel is thriving in her new educational institution. And Noah? It appears that orange has become his new signature color. Occasionally, the most effective form of retribution is not merely observing an individual's downfall. It is ensuring that they have a comprehensive understanding of all the losses they experienced when they reached the nadir. Now to the next story 11. Mocked for my weight, I transformed with confidence. When I returned, my family grew jealous and tried to bring me down. Growing up, I was always an overweight child. I've always been bigger than the majority of the other kindergarten students. While my peers were still figuring out what made them distinctive, my size had already stood out. As I grew older, the weight I carried became more visible. By high school, I was indisputably overweight, and my shape and girth served as a continuous reminder of my differences. College was not much different. While some of my peers began to discover who they were or explore new aspects of themselves, I stayed trapped in the same identity, overweight and occasionally fighting with it. It wasn't easy being the bigger kid. It exposed me to continual ridicule, mockery, and nasty comments from people who didn't know or cared to understand me. Growing up, I was bullied more than I'd want to recall. Classmates teased me mercilessly. Their words ate away at me, creating profound doubts and self-doubt that, at times, felt hard to overcome. They'd call me names and make crude jokes, and I'd frequently be the punchline. I was always singled out, as if I were somehow unworthy of affection or companionship. I was continually excluded from games, parties, and gatherings. It felt like I was always on the outside, watching everyone else go through the regular ups and downs of childhood and adolescence from a distance I couldn't reach. These years of bullying influenced how I perceived myself and responded to the world. I felt out of place with others, so I sought sanctuary in books. I lost myself in literature and stories that helped me escape my daily troubles. Books did not judge me. They did not ridicule me. I became known as the nerd, and I didn't like it all that much. My younger sister, Bonnie, was radically different from me. She was only a year younger than me and possessed an effortless charisma that drew others to her. Bonnie thrived in social situations, whereas I was shy and reserved. She had a magnetic personality. She could come into a room and immediately have everyone smiling, laughing, and absolutely fascinated by her. Bonnie didn't just make friends easily, she seemed to have an intrinsic ability to persuade people to support her, almost as if she were the sun around which everyone gravitated. Regardless of our differences, I adored her. I took my job as her older sister seriously, feeling fiercely protective whenever she needed it. When she began attending the same high school as mine, I was overjoyed. Initially, being Bonnie's older sister made me feel proud, as if I had a particular place in her life. However, as she grew older, things began to alter. As Bonnie settled into high school and began to create her own personality, I saw a difference in how she perceived me. She began to see how different we were, and how differently we were treated. Whereas I was the bookish, quiet kind, she was vivacious and popular, someone who rapidly established herself among the cool circle. I observed as she became aware of my peculiarities and insecurities, which others considered uncool. Bonnie began to distance herself from me as she found new pals. She would then try to actively ignore or avoid me in school. That hurt. It genuinely pained me that my own sibling saw me as inferior. Nonetheless, I did my best to accept her decision, to give her the space she appeared to need, even if it hurt to think I was losing not only my sister, but also a friend. Bonnie gradually stopped ignoring me and began interacting with people who made me feel like an outcast. If Bonnie and I met in the corridors or at lunch, she and her pals would take advantage of any opportunity to embarrass me. They'd taunt me in front of other students or, worse, try to trip me as I passed past with my lunch tray, just to make everyone laugh. It seemed like I was losing her, not only to new people, but to the same mocking and nasty conduct I'd had to put up with for so long. I was always on guard, attempting to avoid not just my peers' criticism but also the humiliation inflicted by my own sister. It hurt a lot, especially because it came from someone I had always admired and looked up to. When Bonnie invited her pals over, they would try to gang up on me at home. They would rush into my room without knocking, then laugh and gesture to my body. They'd fling insults like geek and fatty at me like they were nothing. I'd feel like a zoo animal, as if I were there to entertain them. When they entered my personal space in my room, I felt small and alone, as if I were an alien in my own home. I tried talking to my parents about it several times, hoping they would realize how tough it was for me to deal with Bonnie's conduct. But every time I brought it up, they dismissed my worries. They'd smile and defend her actions, claiming that this was how siblings related, and that Bonnie was merely playing with me. They told me it was harmless, even suggesting that I loosen up and stop taking everyone's taunts so seriously. They told me that I was older and should be more patient and resilient. So, not only did I face years of bullying from my peers, including my own sister, but my concerns were repeatedly rejected by my parents. It made me feel isolated, as if no one in my own family realized or understood how deeply it hurt. The only time I ever felt properly noticed by our parents was when I received my grades. Academics had always come effortlessly to me, and I became accustomed to receiving high grades. In a way, it was the one area where I felt superior to everyone else. It was also the one way I could make my parents proud. The one part of my life that they appeared to actually care about. My parents enjoyed bragging about my accomplishments to friends and family, portraying me as the family scholar, as if my grades were evidence of their parenting prowess. But Bonnie detested the analogies. She was not an academic overachiever, nor did she want to be, but our parents' repeated reminders of my accomplishments made her resentful. They put my grades up as an example, meaning that she needed to do the same. I could always sense her annoyance and rage, which I assume is why she did what she did to me. Bonnie would occasionally attempt to destroy my hard work in order to get back at me. She'd sneak into my room in the middle of the night and take my homework. Sometimes, shortly before a large task was due, I'd wake up in the morning to find my meticulously finished work gone. Panic would set in, and I'd feverishly hunt through my books, papers, and files, becoming increasingly anxious with each passing minute. And there she'd be, smirking, watching me from the doorway, relishing every moment of my anxiety. To her, it was a minor win, a way to bring me down a peg and remind me that I wasn't invincible. She understood how important my grades were to me, how much of my self-worth I had invested in them, and she enjoyed disturbing that aspect of my life. I only out about her stealing my assignments years later, when she drunkenly admitted one evening. My friendship with Bonnie has grown softer over time. Though we're not close, you might say we've matured a little, and some of the bitterness from our youth has dissipated. However, the strong closeness that siblings often enjoy did not fully emerge between us. After college, I moved away and began constructing a life in a new place with an interesting job and new chances, which meant I didn't visit my family very frequently. As time passed, our communications became limited to occasional phone calls or texts. So, when I decided to travel home for the summer, I was truly excited to see everyone. It had been a long time since we'd all gotten together as a family, and I was excited to catch up and reconnect. However, not everything went as planned. Our family lunch began well enough. Everyone appeared delighted to see me, and for a moment, it felt like old times. That changed, however, when Bonnie unexpectedly revealed her engagement. None of us saw it coming, and we initially assumed she was joking. However, it became evident that she was serious. She proudly put out her hand, displaying a gorgeous ring, and I couldn't help but remark how exquisite it was. I was genuinely happy for her, delighted that she'd finally met someone she loved and who loved her back. Almost as soon as the congratulations subsided, Bonnie turned to me and inquired about my recent activities. I told her about my profession, my life, and how rewarding things had been for me. Before I could finish, she cut me off. "I can't help but say this," she started, smirking. "But why are you still fat? I mean, if your life is really that great, shouldn't you have lost weight by now?" Her remarks hit me like a slap, reawakening old insecurities I thought I had overcome. The room became uncomfortably silent, and I could feel everyone's gaze on me, waiting to see how I would respond. I merely shrugged and tried to laugh awkwardly at her comment. But my parents immediately joined in to criticize me. They began talking about how I was still obese and unmarried, and how they were concerned that I would never have children. I felt so mortified hearing them talk like that. My successes, the profession I was proud of, the life I had made on my own in another city, none of it seemed to matter to them. They were just concerned with my weight and the fact that I did not have my own family. As my parents and sister continued to talk about me, their comments wounded deeper than I imagined. I'd spent years of my life finally coming into my own, gaining confidence and independence, yet, at those moments, I felt like the same nervous, awkward teenager I'd always been, desperate for my family's acceptance. My parents then applauded Bonnie for getting engaged before me and expressed their pride in her. To them, I was the inferior child, successful but not quite enough. What was supposed to be a happy family reunion had swiftly turned into a heartbreaking reminder of old scars. At that point, I felt more like an outsider than ever. Bonnie did not stop. She continued to ask probing questions. So, when are you getting married? I mean, do you even have a boyfriend? She was blatantly mocking me in front of everyone by bringing up my romantic life. My parents eagerly jumped on the subject, agreeing with Bonnie that it was past time for me to meet someone before it was too late. They pointed out that Bonnie, being younger, was settling down before me, but I, being older, was still throwing my life away at work. I attempted to argue that I liked my life the way it was, that my profession and freedom provided me with fulfillment. My job paid well, and I was passionate about it. And why did I have to find a man and have a child? I am content just as I am. But my words didn't appear to register. My mother, in particular, appeared disdainful, giving me a pointed look and taunting, "What's the point of earning all that money if you don't have anyone to come home to?" It was as if she couldn't believe that happiness existed outside of marriage or family. Sitting there, I had the typical feeling of being misunderstood, that my life choices were disregarded. This was my family, the ones who should have known me best, but they seemed to be obsessed with a different idea of happiness. I had come home seeking connection and warmth, but instead got judgment and taunts. Bonnie then mentioned that she anticipated me to have at least a +1 by the time her wedding rolled around. She explained that she didn't want people to think her sister was an old, miserable woman who was getting married alone. The comment stung. I simply shook my head and assured her I would try. This is when my parents casually told me that since Bonnie's wedding was approaching, even if I couldn't find a spouse, I could at least try to lose weight and look better for her wedding. They suggested that if I reduced weight, it would be simpler for me to attract a partner. Bonnie agreed with my parents and said she wanted me to lose at least a few pounds. I sat there, astonished and humiliated, with an aching that I hadn't felt in years. How could my relatives talk to me like this? Did I truly deserve their hateful words simply because I was overweight? Was I not meant to have feelings because I was fat? I was a normal human being, just like them. I functioned exactly like everyone else. I never saw my weight as a hindrance, so why should they? I'd even dated men who liked me just the way I was, but my parents and Bonnie were making it appear as if my weight kept me from finding love or having men approach me, which wasn't even true. I wanted to defend myself and tell them how cruel their words were, but I felt paralyzed and unable to find the correct words. Their statements took me back to high school, to the agonizing times when my weight made me a target. I despised how nonchalantly my relatives brought up my deepest fears, seemingly unconcerned about how they affected me. So I sat there, holding in my pain, and let the topic go to anything else. When I returned home from my trip to see my family, I pushed myself into reducing weight with a zeal I had not realized I possessed. It began as a method to prove something to my family, but it eventually grew more personal. I joined a gym, followed a rigorous diet, and even hired a personal trainer. My trainer has been a lifesaver. She knew just how to assist me through a path tailored to my own needs, having gone through her own change from overweight to healthy weight. She created a routine specific to my goals and encouraged me every step of the way, reminding me to give myself grace when I stumbled. This time, everything seemed to click. I started losing weight steadily, and as the pounds fell off, I felt lighter, not just physically but also mentally. For the first time in my life, I began to feel and appear different. My confidence increased quickly. I used to assume that decreasing weight wouldn't have much of an influence, but it has. People see me differently today. Strangers are nicer and more attentive. Friends and colleagues regard me with fresh respect, and I can't deny that this feels like a validation I've never had before. It's as if I've suddenly become more noticeable than I was before. My new body brought a new sense of style. I overhauled my entire wardrobe, filling it with clothing I'd only fantasized about wearing. I even opted for a full hair makeover, attempting a daring and trendy style that I would have been too afraid to try in the past. Perhaps it seems expensive, but I've never felt so good. I look in the mirror now, and I don't recognize the person staring back. It's like meeting a version of myself that I never knew existed. I'm proud of how far I've gone, not just because I've lost weight, but also because I've gained confidence and self-assurance. Bonnie's wedding is approaching, so my family has invited me to fly down and join them for lunch to finalize some details. However, I do not feel like returning home. I don't want my family to ridicule me again and make me feel tiny, especially now that I'm feeling good about myself for the first time in a long while. I don't want to go to Bonnie's wedding anymore because of how she and my parents have treated me. But I know if I don't go, they'll be furious and give me a long lecture about how family is family and how, no matter how heartbroken I am, I must be present for Bonnie's big day. So, would it be wrong for me not to attend my sister's wedding? Update 1. Wow. I'm overwhelmed by everyone's response. Some of your proposals are truly humorous. I can't believe you're encouraging me to show up and mess with my sister now that I've shed so much weight. Growing up as a fat kid had a negative impact on my self-esteem, particularly in terms of how I perceived myself. I struggled with self-doubt for a long time, always believing that I wasn't good enough or didn't measure up to others. But reading all of your responses has been a game changer. It's as if you've helped me see myself in a completely new light, and I'm finally starting to feel more confident than I ever have. In fact, I'm seriously considering turning up to my family's lunch and shocking them. They haven't seen me in a long time, and since I don't use social media, they have no idea how much weight I've dropped. It will be interesting to witness their reactions. Update 2. Okay, Reddit, you're not prepared for this upgrade. Grab some popcorn because things are about to get exciting. I decided to fly down to join my family for lunch. I assumed that when they saw me, they would be happy with the transformation I had undergone, because after all, they had been the ones who pushed me toward it in the first place. Surely, they'd be overjoyed to see the positive improvements in me and finally recognize the effort I'd put in. The instant I walked into my parents' house, their jaws absolutely dropped. They looked at me, astonished, as if they couldn't believe I was the same person. After a time, they stammered, wondering if it was actually me. I gave them a big hug, thrilled with their reaction. They continually complimented my appearance, saying how beautiful I looked and how they couldn't believe it was me. However, when Bonnie came, the situation changed. She didn't notice me at first, disregarding me as if I were invisible, as she had done many times before. But when I rose up to greet her, she did a double take, her eyes widening with surprise. She gave an odd, almost forced laugh before reaching over and pushing her fingers on my stomach, wide-eyed, as if she wanted proof that I had truly dropped all of that weight. My parents chuckled at her reaction and informed her that they couldn't believe it either. As we settled in for lunch, the subject turned to my makeover. Bonnie and my parents bombarded me with questions about how I'd done it, marveling at how different I appeared. Their voices were full of surprise, as if they had never imagined I could look any other way. Bonnie, in particular, kept saying that she had never anticipated me to shift so dramatically. After a while, she said, "When I first requested you to lose weight, I never imagined you'd look this good. I had no idea you had that jawline and those ankles underneath all that fat." I hesitated, trying to retain my cool, and smiled at her before telling her, "Bonnie, I've always been gorgeous. Losing weight simply improved my characteristics." Bonnie, on the other hand, contended that it wasn't just that. There was something else about me that was unique. She then had the audacity to inquire, "Did you have any procedures done on yourself? Because you can't look this fantastic on your own." I could feel my blood starting to boil. The hubris to believe that I required surgery to look attractive, despite the fact that I had worked so hard to achieve my current appearance. I looked her directly in the eyes and said, "Wow, Bonnie. It's amazing how little you think of me. No surgery, just a lot of hard work and self-love, which you should try someday." Bonnie's expression changed from surprise to displeasure, but I didn't care. It felt amazing to finally say something and put her in her place. Before she could react, my parents jumped in, attempting to smooth things over in their own way. "You shouldn't be offended," my mother replied. "All three of us have never seen you look like this before. Honestly, you look more lovely now than Bonnie, and she's the one getting married." Bonnie appeared much angrier following Mom's remark. I simply ignored her and concentrated on my food, allowing my sister to seethe in her rage. Then my mother interjected. "You know, I was thinking, maybe you should go back to your original hair color. I believe you would look even better in your natural hue. This blonde appearance causes you to stand out too much. Maybe you could just return to your former look." Bonnie and my father quickly agreed with her. My father supported my mother, saying that Bonnie was always the blonde daughter in the family and I was the brunette, so it would be a good idea for me to return to my original hair color, which would make me appear more like myself. Hearing their statements, I was taken aback. I suddenly felt like the three of them were ganging up on me and attempting to bring me down. My hairstylist was the one who changed my hair color to blonde because it complemented my skin tone and face better. It had nothing to do with attempting to outperform or overshadow my sister. I could see why Bonnie was jealous of me because I looked so nice right now, but I couldn't figure out why my parents were so unhappy with me. It was as if they wanted to revert me to my original self, despite the fact that they were the ones who wanted me to be more acceptable for their darling daughter's forthcoming wedding. But now that I did, they couldn't accept who I had become. Instead of recognizing my progress, they sought to undermine me. Finally, I questioned my folks. What is your problem? Why can't I be blonde? Does my sister own that hue or something? I paused, annoyed. No, she doesn't. I can be either blonde or brunette. It's my decision. Why does it matter to you so much? I couldn't understand why they were so obsessed with returning to my former self, as if my appearance had to match who I was. My mother scoffed at me, claiming that I was willfully sabotaging Bonnie's approaching wedding by attempting to stand out with my appearance. Bonnie also jumped in, suggesting that with my weight loss, I was already going to stand out, so did I really need to match her hair color? My father, as usual, agreed with them, telling me that I was being difficult for no reason and that, as Bonnie's sister, I should be more tolerant. I couldn't believe what I heard. It was not about stealing anything, it was about giving myself the freedom to do whatever made me happy. But instead of supporting it, they were all concerned about how it would make Bonnie uncomfortable. Do you know what? I'm done with this, I murmured, the words almost burning as they left my lips. The three of you are so wrapped up in your own negativity that you can't even admit I've changed. The reality is, I've always been fantastic just the way I am, but none of you ever noticed. Now that I've lost weight, it's still not good enough for you. No matter what I do, it is never enough. I took time to process what I had just said. They only gazed at me, and it didn't matter. I was done with holding back. Since you all have so much to say about me, I believe it is time I gave you some unsolicited advice, just like you do to me. I turned to my mother first, feeling the words surge inside me like a deluge. Mom, I really hate how loose the skin is around your eyes and your lips. They droop on one side when you laugh. I can't help but notice all your crooked teeth, and honestly, it's just disgusting to me. Dad, I said sharply. You're bald. You really have no right to say anything about anyone's hair or their hair color. How are you going to criticize someone's looks when you can't even keep a full head of hair? I noticed his face stiffening, but I wasn't finished yet. Finally, I resorted to Bonnie. And you, don't ever talk down to me again. Between the two of us, I've always been the better-looking sibling. But now, with all the weight I've lost, you look even fatter than me. Just look at those chubby arms of yours. Bonnie's cheeks flushed with shame, and she appeared to be on the verge of tears. I then hoisted my glass, downed my drink in one go, and walked out with a smirk, leaving everyone stunned and astonished. I said everything I had to say. I couldn't believe these words had come from my mouth, yet I didn't regret them one bit. They deserved to be humiliated after years of being criticized. After lunch, I flew directly back home. I didn't want to stay behind and attend Bonnie's wedding. Since then, my phone has been overloaded with voicemails and texts from my parents and Bonnie. They've been calling me disrespectful and foul-mouthed for how I spoke to them and then left. Mom even insists that I fly down to Bonnie's wedding, claiming that not having me there will make her in-laws unhappy. Update 3. So I ended up skipping Bonnie's wedding. Thanks to all of your suggestions, instead of returning home to attend, I decided to treat myself to an impromptu stay at a 5-star resort. It was truly one of the best moves I'd made in a long time. I spent the weekend doing whatever made me happy, no drama or pressure, just pure enjoyment. I treated myself to a spa day, binge-watched my favorite shows, and even discovered some new sites in the city that I'd been dying to visit. I've also blocked my relatives, so they can't contact me again. I'm weary of being bullied by them and want to avoid all of the poison and drama. Right now, my primary focus is on self-care. And next to story 12. I exposed my half-sister for cheating and revealed my father's infidelity, making him lose everything in the divorce as revenge. Edit. Hello. To anyone coming from those other subs, I will remove any comments on my posts that are harsh and intended to bully me. I've already received some, and I see my post has been shared in other areas. I know the sub since I was tagged by an automod. I didn't share my experience of being bullied or called a liar, so screw it. I never asked to be posted on subreddits dedicated to mocking others because you enjoy bullying others. Get a dang life. Here's a life lesson for you neckbeard idiots. Get away from the keyboard. Did the post get removed? It is all here now. So, I, 20 female, have a sister. I'm going to call her Freya, because why not? She's 22. She has cheated often since she began dating, creating an unending circle of infidelity. Her first romance occurred when she was 15, and I was 13. She introduced me to Brad. Sweetheart. Great guy. 2 days later, she spent a significant amount of time in her room with her study buddy. I was not foolish. I figured out what she was doing. Heck, she informed her friends. She boasted to them about it while sitting on our living room couch. As soon as she did it, I realized she wasn't a good person. She disgusted me. When she and her study partner returned to her room, I took a picture via the keyhole in her door. They were simply kissing, gross, but nothing worse. I waited. The next day, I took her phone and obtained Brad's number. I texted him, explaining who I was and why I was messaging him. He did not believe she was cheating. I texted him the picture and begged him not to tell her how he discovered it. He agreed. They broke up. Obviously. She was heartbroken and blamed her pals for telling him. She never suspected me. Why should she? I was the sister who clung to her, imitated what she wore, and observed everything she did. I admired her. I kept up the pretense. I didn't want her to know what I knew or had done. I hoped she learned her lesson. However, she didn't. The next true boyfriend arrived when she was 17 and I was 15. I'd been watching her like a hawk, waiting for the next boyfriend. Nobody would date her for a while after Brad. She was a cheater after all. Even her study companion didn't want to date her because he already had a girlfriend. That condition did not continue longer than a month. After Brad broke up with Freya, someone informed his study partner's girlfriend that he was a cheater. Weird. Anyway, let's introduce Steven. Trusting, maybe a little dim. He saw the best in everyone. She convinced him that she and Brad had only ever kissed, nothing else. I didn't believe it, but whatever. This naive church lad believed she had transformed after only 2 years. Okay. Sure. After a month, I still had no dirt. I started to wonder if she had changed. Bam. She boasted to her buddies about cheating on Steven. I remained hidden. I needed the specifics. I wish I had documented the confession, but I did not. What I did hear was that she was going to meet her side piece at the park the next afternoon. We were both old enough to leave the house whenever we wanted. All we had to do was tell our mother where we were going. The next day, she stated that she was heading to the mall. I stated that I was hanging out with buddies. I waited till she was a few minutes ahead of me before going to the park. I took images of them hugging under a tree. Kissing. Rinse, repeat. Steven pledged to keep the information secret. He handed her the photos, but this time there was no proof of who took them. She would have caught me if I had taken them up close, but those images could have been shot anywhere. They were in the midst of a park. Relationship number 3. Enter the bad dude. I despised him. He was rude, disgusting, and disrespectful. This one was tricky. He was obviously on the rebound, only a few weeks after Steven, but I got a nasty feeling. I suspected he would be the type to hurt her if she cheated on him. I had to persuade her to end the relationship or have him leave her without blaming her. Even if she was terrible, I needed to plan carefully. I waited for evidence. Do you believe it? They were cheating on each other, with the same guy. I felt calling them out would merely transform them into a throuple. I was mistaken. Bad lad despised the thought of someone knowing he was gay. When he discovered that Freya knew he was bisexual, he fled so quickly that his tires caught fire. 3 down. My sister still didn't know who was exposing her, but she was becoming suspicious. She was ranting about me without realizing it, so I knew. Then she told me her strategy. She planned to tell each of her friends a different narrative and see which one her next boyfriend would get. I helped her make up phony names, descriptions, and locations. It was honestly quite enjoyable. Boyfriend number 4 was not a boyfriend, but rather a guy acquaintance of hers who was involved in the conspiracy. He wanted Freya so desperately that he would do everything to get her attention. She informed friend A she was cheating on 4 with a blonde guy and would see him at the ice cream shop tomorrow. Friend B has brown hair, beach. Friend C has red hair, house. Friend D got bald, Starbucks. Freya wanted me to check out the ice cream shop. Freya stayed at home, while 4 went to Starbucks. No one was on the beach. She reasoned that if none of us observed anything at the sites, then friend B was responsible. We did exactly that. It was hilarious to receive her continuous texts wondering whether anyone had seen someone. She was in a panic. Buddy B had been her best buddy since she was in diapers, and she did not want it to be them. In the end, nobody came up. She yelled at B in a text, accusing them of being a poor friend and alerting her ex-partners about her adultery. B disputed this heavily. But their friendship was in ruins. I supported B, claiming Freya was insane for suspecting them. Friend C supported Freya, saying it was suspicious that A, C and D did not show up at their assigned locations, and reasoning led to B. D felt they were all mad and even blamed me, claiming that if I was the snitch, why would all of the pals have turned up anywhere? They were unable to prove anything because no one was present on the beach. Freya felt offended. She said she would never hurt me, that she loved me too much to do so. We were sisters after all. In the end, D supported A and B because they believed Freya was insane. C remained with Freya. 4 and Freya never became a pair. Freya began dating Freya after believing the rat had disappeared. Poor, sweet Freya. His was the most terrible story since she cheated on him with his twin brother. This occurred when she was 20 and I was 18. Perhaps I was too old for this, but I wasn't finished yet. I was not going to let her ruin a nice guy's life. It took me longer to figure out this one. Twin brothers never question photos on Snapchat. Never question the guy's appearance. Why should they? They were twins. Then Freya shaved his head for a cancer-stricken buddy. His twin didn't? That is how I caught her? I obtained a video of them kissing in his car. Send it to Freya. I wiped my hands clean. He showed her the footage, and she freaked out. She had not informed anyone about the infidelity this time. Not me. Not C. Not 4. And since they were twins, she assumed no one would notice. Finally, she dated 4. The only guy remaining in our small town who was foolish enough to take her seriously. Of course, she did what she always did. She cheated. Here's the problem, I wasn't sure he'd break up with her over it, or if he'd believe it at all. So I waited. Collected evidence? In an unexpected twist of events, I discovered C and 4 cheating. They cheated on her. I submitted 4 images of Freya cheating. I emailed Freya photos of 4 cheating. It burst. She had no pals. Not one. She'd pushed them all away. And now, everyone in our small town knew she was a cheater. You might be asking why I'm telling this story right now. Why are you destroying my sister like this? I detest her. I've loathed her since I was a child. See, we're only half-sisters. Same father, different mothers? Our father cheated on her mom with my mother. My mother, whom I loved, was crippled. And my father had a superior attorney. When I was 5 years old, he abducted me from her. Legally, I assume. But my mother was only permitted visitation, nothing else. I have to see her once a week, for 1 hour. She was not considered safe to have children. When I got older, I would sneak over to her house after school to spend more time with her. My beloved older sister caught me and informed our father. We returned to court. And as a foolish 8-year-old, I told a judge that I despised my father. That he cheated? That guy was filth. That I wished he didn't know me. It was determined that my mother was isolating me from my father. And my visitation was restricted. I was sent to therapy to fix my feelings toward my father. Now, yes, I understand. She was just 10. But she never apologized. Even when I brought it up years later, she found nothing wrong with her actions. My mother died a year later. My father forbade me from attending her burial. My maternal grandparents attempted to push his hand, went to court. But they were shut down. They were instructed that unless they had proof that my father was a bad dad, they should not waste time. My father's wife forgave him. Not too bright in my opinion. She reared me with him. And I had my sister, who I despised. I pretended not to. Because the best retribution is best served cold. So, why tell this story now? Because my adorable half-sister uses this subreddit. I don't believe she has ever posted, but she lurks. And I'm moving out. I am going to live with my maternal grandparents. Why now, at 20, rather than at 18? Because today, the final nail in my revenge was driven into the coffin. I left photos all throughout the house. Photos of my father cheating on my stepmother, with several women. All are date-stamped, dating back to when they took me in approximately a week ago. Walmart's photo print service was quite helpful. I only want to destroy my father, and my sister. My stepmother, whom I honestly feel awful for, has a prenuptial agreement. If he cheats on her, he will receive nothing. She owns the home. The autos. The summer house. They have a shared bank account, which he may drain. However, to my understanding, the majority of her money is in a separate account. She's super rich. She was wealthy enough to pay for whatever I needed as a child, and she smiled the entire while. I'm not sure if she ever resented me. But she never revealed it. She treated me exactly like my sister. In addition, I left documentation that my sister was aware of our father's infidelity. Proof that my darling sister knew her mother was being cheated on but said nothing. Chat logs. Vocal recordings. Even physical invoices for presents he purchased to keep her quiet. It is all there. Waiting inside the home. Today, both my sister and father are away for the weekend. My stepmother will arrive home in a few hours. And I'll be gone. Even if Freya sees this 10 seconds after I hit post, she won't be able to clean up the mess in time. Okay, I see a lot of questions concerning the keyhole. To explain, my house is really old. Built by the residents of this town, back when dwellings were made by hand. You would just yell, "Help me build," and I'll buy the beer for the day. Unfortunately, they made several poor style decisions. Every bedroom door has a huge hole beneath the handle shaped like a keyhole. It was integrated into the metal plate connecting to the doorknob. The keyholes had no lock-like function. That house was so old that when we renovated it, we discovered knob and tube wiring. What about the insulation? Newspaper. Old bed sheets, Bible pages were torn, and more. There was also a frightening doll. Other unusual design decisions included what my sister dubbed a Coraline door. It once connected to a barn beside the house. But the barn had been gone for several years. And the real kicker? The basement light switch was in a restroom, not near the basement door. The bathroom light switch was located outside the bathroom. The cloth washer drain is linked to the shower, and when the washer is turned on, the shower bubbles up occasionally. To get rid of it, turn on the shower. In the basement, on the ceiling, there are several jar lids tacked to a piece of board because the previous owners used to nail the lids up and screw the jars in to retain nails, screws, and shattered glass. According to my father, the house is filthy, and strange things make little sense. There were other things I can't recall right now, but you assume the keyhole was more prevalent. It turns out it isn't, which surprises me. Edit. Many of you believe that a wealthy lady should live in a nice home. The house we lived in was purchased while she was pregnant with Freya. My father's grandparents and her great-grandfather were the builders, I believe, maybe not. All I know is that it was his family's home for years. He grew up there, but they lost it and had to relocate. He met and married my stepmother, and they stayed with her parents while searching for a home. He saw his old house for sale and begged my stepmother for it. She agreed on the proviso that they only hire labor when absolutely necessary, as her parents trained her to spend money wisely. They had Freya. He made minor repairs to one of the rooms, but no major renovations occurred at the time because they had a baby and were very busy. When they got me, the only repairs I knew about were that mine and Freya's rooms were cold. He opened the wall to inspect the insulation, which was old newspapers. The plan was for me and Freya to remain in their room while my stepmother and father slept on the couch until it was repaired. While doing this, he discovered the knob and tube wiring. We left the house while an expert repaired the wiring throughout the house. Then he finished insulating. When it comes to antique keyholes, my stepmother felt 3 were adorable. The bathroom was the only one that had been fixed. He removed the old-style handle, replaced it with a lockable one, pushed something into the hole, and plastered or painted over it, I'm not sure. We also tore up the 2 layers of carpet and removed the wallpaper from every room. While doing this in the living room, we discovered the Coraline door, as we named it. My father informed me that there used to be a barn immediately next to the home, and he assumed that was where it led. If you opened it now, you'd find nothing because the barn was gone. They hadn't just left an open hole in the wall, there were around 6 layers of wallpaper covering the door. These repairs and changes were always going on, all my father's work, because it was his paper and he understood what he was doing. I don't remember what happened when I was a kid. Also, you appear to believe that children aged 8 to 10 are stupid and incapable of holding grudges, which is absurd. I believe I mentioned that the revenge began at 13. Sure, the problem began at 8, but I had till 13 to stew and be outraged. No, I did not do this because a 10-year-old made an error. I did it because my sister never realized what she was doing was wrong. She told me I had a better family because of it, that my mother was a R, and that she did what was best and right. I despise her for never apologizing or acknowledging how much she damaged me. Edit. You want an update? I promise to give one, but things are hectic right now, so please wait. Question. Should I make a new post for the update or just add it here when I believe it's time? I keep seeing folks enter update me. How does this work? Question 2. Someone advised posting this in the Revenge subreddit. I do not want to copy and paste this. Does anyone who reads more than me know how to share the post or something in such subreddits so that more people may appreciate it? Question 3. I notice now that there has been a cross post. Is that what I asked you about above? If so, how can I see where it has been cross-posted? I've been enjoying reading comments on Reddit and TikTok and don't want to miss out while waiting for things to settle down. Edit. Whoever dared to send Reddit care after me, sucks to be you. I'm already in therapy, and I learned a long time ago that you don't have to notify anyone until the act is completed. So it's too late for a therapist to try to quell the raging fire in your heart. Edit. I believe you will receive an update sometime today. I was going to update immediately, but I received a call from my therapist a few minutes ago, so I now have an appointment. Is it possible that this is because the video was shared on TikTok? Is there any dread in it? Or is this a coincidence? Update. I have wrecked my sister's relationships and friendships. Now I'm tearing apart her family. Am I pleased about it? Okay, hi everyone, you all requested an update. The original is growing too long, so I'm writing a second post on it. I'll start with my stepmother's reaction. Around the time she would have arrived home, I sat in front of my phone, waiting like a child on Christmas. To my disappointment, all I received was a text message. It said, tomorrow. Lunch, favorite pizza place. It didn't say the exact name, but you get the idea. That was all. I wondered whether she was going to take my life. After some discussion with my companions, I left. Dumb? Possibly. Am I still alive? You could say that. So I met my stepmother at my favorite pizza shop. We ordered, and she smiled at me. It was sort of creepy. She inquired if I understood why she had invited me out. My response was obviously idiotic, but I said, to murder me? She laughed, shook her head, and told me she had spent too much time keeping my dumb buttocks alive to kill me now. She said she invited me since she no longer has a need to keep my father's secrets from me. I, the theatrical dung beetle, asked for information. She provided. I still do not like her, but damn. She inquired whether I knew how my parents met. Obviously, I said no. She said that her cousin, Annie, was hosting a party for her friends and family. Adrian was acquainted with my mom, but she had never met my stepmother or father. My mother was born blind but enjoyed parties anyhow. There was alcohol there, but my mother simply drank pop in a glass with ice. My mother departed early because she didn't want to be away from Freya for too long, while my father stayed. Adrian presented my father and mother. Adrian had no reason to believe anything would occur. Adrian had already become intoxicated. Adrian, according to my stepmother, is unaware of what transpired next. She wasn't sure if my father had brought my mother a fresh cup with something other than pop, if he had dropped something in her drink, or if she had taken the wrong cup. Adrian glanced over and noticed my mother wobbling. In Sam's drunken view, my mother was plainly inebriated. There were a lot of cups on the table, so Adrian imagined Mom had grabbed the wrong cup too often. She brought my mother upstairs to sleep it off. That was the last time she saw my mother that night, though she did see my father a few times. Adrian continued to hang out with my mother, and one day, she revealed that she was pregnant. At the time, my mother was single. Adrian did some mental math and blew out, asking my mother a lot of questions, but my mother laughed it off, claiming she became pregnant after a one-night stand, not at the party. Adrian agreed hesitantly. Adrian cared for both me and Freya when I was born. Her red flags went up again when she saw us side by side, so she took a DNA test, one with me and one with Adrian, figuring that if it was a family member, we would be a slight match. We were not a good match, and she was relieved. Adrian babysat for us again when I was 3 and Freya was 5. According to my stepmother, Adrian couldn't stop staring at us and conducted another test on me and Freya. She received the results, and her heart fell. Freya and I were a match. She remained silent for a while, periodically asking my mother questions, but she couldn't keep it a secret and eventually told my stepmother. My stepmother exploded at my father. He said he was inebriated and confused my mother for her. He claimed there was consent, but it was a mistake that occurred only once. My stepmother agreed to forgive him on the condition that he be a part of my life. She expected him to concede that my mother would not want to be near him, but he and my mother settled in court. My stepmother expressed her dissatisfaction with this, but she accepted it. When I became increasingly alienated from my father, she handed him money for family therapy and play dates. He used this money, plus his own, to hire a lawyer and essentially take me. She couldn't stop him once she knew what he had done. She continued to have little to no interest in me and refused to become involved. My mother died, and she understood something. If she left him now, she would be leaving me with an imbecile who would most likely sell me for a pair of shoes. If she left, she could take Freya, but she had no claim to me, and I never allowed her to adopt me. That was not helping. She attempted to assist my grandparents in fighting for me, but they were silenced. She decided she'd put up with him to protect me. Her words. I don't know if this is real. She claimed she didn't care now that I knew the truth. She was divorcing him and wouldn't have to think about him anymore. I asked her about Freya, and she shrugged, saying her daughter resembles her father too much for her liking. She planned to give Freya a couple options for addressing the issues she observed in her, such as therapy or cutting off contact with her father. But she was going to steal everything from my father, because the prenuptial agreement they signed stated that the cheater gets nothing but the clothing on their back. This is just what I wanted. We left it there. She held me and apologized for not being better, for making so many mistakes, and for making me dislike both her and Freya. She said that if I needed anything, I should let her know. I'm starting to believe I misjudged her. I don't know yet though. We parted ways, and I returned home. I waited and waited before getting a call from my dad. I did not respond. He texted me, stating I was a terrible daughter, that he wanted me out of his house, LOL, and that he never wanted to see me again. He said I destroyed his marriage for a deceased lady he barely knew. He was furious about it, but I texted him back and told him that he had years to stop cheating on my stepmother and not let me catch him. He could have lived the picture-perfect life he believed he deserved. On my mother's behalf, I also used some strong language toward him. Next up came Freya. She did, in fact, locate the post. And did they apologize? Not. She texted me paragraph after paragraph, calling me a manipulative boonies and claiming I spent my life lying to her face about a mistake she made when she was 10. That she did not have to apologize or feel awful. That I should have enjoyed being a member of a new rich family. That I did not need to notify her mother about her father's bribery or her dishonesty. During the discussion, I told my stepmother that it was my fault that she gave Freya the ultimatum to go to therapy, break off contact with Dad, or find another place to live. I merely replied with a laughing emoji and blocked both her and my father. That was all yesterday. It doesn't end there. As some of you know, my therapist phoned me this morning. He inquired whether I had time to meet today. I did, and so I met with him. When I stepped in, he turned his laptop towards me and showed me a TikTok video about me. He questioned, "Is this you?" I couldn't stop laughing. He only shook his head, saying he had a lot more work to do than he expected, but he was smiling. I noticed the smile. He just didn't want to tell me that he felt my retribution was fantastic. I know it. We talked briefly about the problem and how far it was. I disagree, but whatever. I left. Later, my stepmother called and begged for assistance with something. I went to her residence out of curiosity. She told me that her lawyer recommended her to allow Dad time yesterday to come get his belongings and leave. He gathered what he could, and today we were going to make a campfire. I questioned if this was lawyer approved, and she shrugged, stating it was her property regardless. Dad didn't buy any of it and probably couldn't afford a lawyer to fight her. So we tossed a lot of stuff in a mound and let it burn. It was kind of fun. She summoned Auntie Adrian over, who cried and held me because she felt guilty about not telling me. But she despised my father and refused to be near him. I showed my stepmother the text from Freya, and she called Freya, telling her she had only herself to blame. She told her not to blame me since she couldn't stop chasing nice guys away. If she wanted to stay with a wonderful guy, she should stop acting like her unfaithful mess of a father. She informed Freya she had a week to make her decision. She's an adult, and my stepmother can leave her whenever she wants. Then she hung up. My stepmother, Auntie Sam, and I ordered pizza. My stepmother's father called to find out what was going on and why Freya had shown up at their house crying. My stepmother went inside. I'm not sure what she said, but she walked out looking smug and told me not to worry about Freya because he was no longer my concern. I brushed it off and replied, "Whatever. Anyway, the day isn't finished yet, but I've blocked Freya and Dad." My maternal grandparents have confirmed that after my mother died, my stepmother was ready to slip them money to hire a lawyer and fight for me. I confronted her about not assisting them when Mom was alive, but she maintains that she was unaware my father was bringing them to court the second time until it was too late. She also expressed reluctance to contact my mother after assisting in the kidnapping. My stepmother's parents have also advised me not to worry about my father and Luca. If they do anything further after this, they will wish they had licked their wounds and moved on. I'm not sure what my stepmother's parents told Luca, but they appear to be strongly opposed to cheating of any type and believe Freya should do as my stepmother advised. Cut off Dad, seek therapy, and apologize to me. That, I believe, concludes things. It was chaotic for a while, but I'm getting on with my life, washing my hands of Freya and Dad. My stepmother said she entirely understands if I don't want anything to do with her. She said she made a lot of mistakes when I was younger, but she still wants to help me with expenditures and other things. In any case, everyone in my small town is aware of what they have done. Some individuals in my town, not just my therapist, discovered the post, and drama travels quickly. Apparently, I also own it. When people ask me about it, I tell them because I want them to understand what they did to me. I don't believe my stepmother is facing much blowback. She delivered all of the images I printed off to her lawyer, who laughed at the pile and claimed that my mere existence was enough proof for the divorce, but the pile didn't matter. Especially since I wrote dates on many of the photos, some of which were extremely recent. I don't believe this is as nice as the previous post because I never expected to make an update. I kind of just wrote it as it happened. I hope this calms down the drama fans in the comments. If anything more happens, I will probably post it here. There will not be any further updates.